Chapter 108. The obscene temple was not literally a temple dedicated to the god of lasciviousness. Instead, it referred to a temple dedicated to the god of lasciviousness that was not officially recognized. It referred to a temple that was spontaneously formed among the people to worship all kinds of strange gods. There were temples that formed spontaneously in various places. The land of Wu and Chu had many temples dedicated to various deities, such as Xiangyu Temple, Tongshu Wang, Qinfu Marquis, Wuxian Emperor, Linxi Marquis, Bahi Emperor, Qinba King, Lu Pensi King, Lu Ma King, Dou Xing Emperor, and so on. The people worshipped whenever they wanted to. It was purely out of utilitarianism. These temples did not have any religious spirit or philosophy of life to guide people to do good. In this way, it would not only involve some fakes taking advantage of the opportunity to make money and use superstition to do evil, but it would also involve the issue of faith. Even though there were not many and obvious political activities using religious beliefs at that time, it would inevitably lead to a disaster if such religious activities were allowed to develop. Whether it was the 5 pecks of rice sect or the way of peace, it was a disaster that affected the whole country. The emperor of the Tang dynasty worshipped Taoism, and Wu Zetian worshipped Buddhism because they knew the great power of religion and used it. With Wu Zetian's foresight, she could obviously see the political significance of Di Renjia's actions. In her opinion, a few unjust cases were just a capable official. To be able to clean up the root of the problem was the ability of a capable official. Wu Zetian pondered for a moment and said leisurely, "The imperial court is in need of manpower. It is a waste to put Master Di in Jiangnan." Shanghai Wan heard this and immediately knew that Di Renjia was going to be rehabilitated. Di Renjia came from a family of officials. His grandfather, Di Xiaoxiu, was the left minister during the Jingguan period. His father, Di Jixuan, was the chief inspector of Kuizhou. Di Renjia himself was a jinshi who passed the Mingjing examination. Since becoming an official, his political achievements were outstanding, and his official career was smooth sailing. However, last year, when the king of Lengjia, Li Chong, rebelled against Wu Zetian sent Prime Minister Zhang Guangfu to quell the rebellion, while Di Renjia was appointed as the provincial governor of Yu province to clean up the mess. Zhang Guangfu was proud of his achievements. When he saw that Di Renjia had taken over a large amount of resources left behind by the rebel army, he extorted bribes from him. Di Renjia did not agree. Instead, he angrily reprimanded Zhang Guangfu for killing the surrendered soldiers in order to obtain military merits. Zhang Guangfu harbored hatred in his heart. When he returned to the court, he found a crime to impeach Di Renjia. He had a high position and power. As the prime minister of the court, he also had the merit of quelling the rebellion. In order to appease the meritorious minister, Wu Zetian had no choice but to demote Di Renjia to Jiangnan. Now it seemed that Di Renjia's actions were in line with the empress' wishes, and he was going to be promoted again. Wu Zetian muttered to herself. Of course, she didn't say it casually. In fact, she wanted to tell her something. If Di Renjia wanted to return to the imperial court, he would need someone to recommend him and promote him. She would need to arrange suitable officials to carry out these things. Whether Shangguan Wan'er did well or not, whether the opposing voices in the court were strong or weak, the empress could only make further decisions. If the opposing voices were too strong, she could advance and retreat calmly. Shangguan Wan'er's power was extremely heavy. This was a manifestation of this. Even if Shangguan Wan'er was very obedient and didn't deliberately play with power, whether or not she was willing to help you, she could still decide your official position. Once your position was confirmed, it would be difficult to get promoted again. Sometimes it was possible to stay in this position for a lifetime until you retired. Shangguan Wan'er was like the Minister of Internal Affairs. Because of these reasons, she could unknowingly influence the court's politics and influence the promotion and demotion of officials. At this time, someone came in and reported, "Empress, the master of White Horse Temple requests to see you." Wu Zetian slightly raised her eyebrows. She said in surprise, "Master's here? Invite him in." As she said this, she put down the memorial in her hand. Shangguan Wanner slightly waved her hand. The palace maids and eunuchs in the hall withdrew one after another. Shangguan Wanner said to Wu Zetian, "Wanner, go wait in the corridor." "Yes." Wu Zetian nodded. Her eyes flashed. She saw Xue Huai rushing in with big strides. Shangguan Wanner. Xue Huai didn't dare to be rude to this official close to the emperor. He stopped in his tracks and bowed to her. Shangguan Wanner smiled sweetly and said, "Master Xue." Wanner's smile was full of charm. Xue Huai didn't look sideways. After bowing, he took a step forward and put his palms together. He solemnly bowed to Wu Zetian. "This poor monk greets the empress." Wanner lightly waved her sleeves and gracefully retreated. Wu Zetian stretched her waist and reclined on the bed. She smiled at him and said, "Why did Master come at this time?" At this time, Xue Huai's strength was no longer as fresh to Wu Zetian. Since Wu Zetian had opened the door to take in a gigolo, there was no longer any taboo. When Xue Huai led the army to attack the Eastern Turks, Empress Wu took a fancy to imperial physician Shen Nani. This imperial physician Shen was refined and elegant. His demeanor was very different from that of a common man like Xue Huai. Although he was not as strong as Xue Huai, he had a kind of elegance and refinement. Thus, he became Wu Zetian's new favorite. Xue Huai was still kept in the dark. But as Wu Zetian's first gigolo, sharing a bed with her for so many years, Wu Zetian's feelings for Xue Huai were still very deep. Xue Huai's position in her heart was still the highest, and the one she doted on the most was still Xue Huai. This was something that Shen Nani could not compare to. Xue Huai laughed and walked over to sit on the bed. He placed a hand on Wu Zetian's soft waist and gently caressed it. He said, "Empress, Huai has come to bring good news to Empress." Wu Zetian rested her chin on her hand and lazily closed her eyes. She grabbed his hand and gently moved it to her chest. She comfortably sighed and said, "What good news? Did your white horse temple also produce some auspicious sign?" Listening to her tone, it was likely that all kinds of auspicious signs that appeared in various places in the world were either far-fetched or fake. She actually knew all of them, and these things could not be hidden from her. However, these things were necessary to build momentum, and even more so to make countless commoners in the world believe in them. So it did not matter whether she believed it or not. Her attitude must be serious and welcoming. She had already done this kind of show too many times. She could not refuse, but her heart could not help but be tired. So, if at this time someone else came, even if it was a hooligan on the street, and said that he had discovered some auspicious sign, Empress would put on a very believing and very happy expression. But in front of her own man, she revealed her true attitude. Xue Huai laughed and said, "Auspicious sign? That's right, it is auspicious. It is the biggest auspicious sign in the world, even bigger than the Luoyang God stone. Does Empress like to hear about it?" When Wu Zetian heard that it was indeed auspicious, she felt very bored in her heart. But she did not want to spoil her lover's mood, so she lazily said, "Let's hear it." Xue Huai proudly said, "Empress, ever since Huai was bestowed the title of White Horse Temple Master by Empress, I have been diligently studying the scriptures every day. I have read all the scriptures in the Sutra Depository and unexpectedly discovered that Empress is in charge of the world. The Buddha, Gautama Buddha, has long been revealed to the world in the scriptures." As he said this, he gently caressed Wu Zetian's chest. Wu Zetian closed her eyes and comfortably enjoyed his caress. She even rested her head on his lap. But when these words entered her ears, Wu Zetian suddenly sat up. Her eyes lit up and she asked in surprise, "Is this true?" If you want to rule the world, of course you need strength. But to sit firmly in the world, strength alone is definitely not enough. Without the people's hearts, The strong and the weak will gradually change positions. Now that Wu Zetian wanted to rule the world, she already had enough strength. The reason why she did not allow others to persuade her and waited patiently at such an old age was because her influence was not enough and she did not have enough control over the people's hearts. At this time, Xue Huai actually said that he found the basis for him to become an emperor in the Buddhist scriptures. How could Wu Zetian not be surprised and happy? Xue Huai saw that Wu Zetian was moved and felt proud in his heart. He said yes. Huai flipped through the Great Cloud Sutra. It was recorded that there was a pure light goddess who once listened to the Buddha preach the Great Nirvana Sutra. Later, she gave up her heavenly body and gave birth to a daughter. She became a ruler to protect the law. Since there was a goddess who reincarnated and became a ruler, then empress, you can naturally also become an emperor. Hearing this, Wu Zetian was happy at first, but after thinking about it carefully, she shook her head. Xue Huai couldn't help but feel nervous. He hurriedly said, "What is it inappropriate?" Wu Zetian thought about it for a long time and said, "Master, this story is really too obscure. It can't be used to educate the people." Xue Huai racked his brain to think of such a good idea to compliment Empress Wu. Hearing that Wu Zetian rejected this idea, he couldn't help but feel disappointed. He said, "This isn't enough to prove that Empress should become an emperor." Wu Zetian smiled and touched his bald head. She softly said, "Master, I am very happy that you have put in so much effort for me. I am not saying that this story of yours can't be used. I am saying that your understanding is wrong. You didn't explain it clearly enough." Xue Huai was at a loss. He said, "What does Empress think, then?" If it was someone else, Wu Zetian only needed to give a hint or a look, and the other party would be able to handle the matter well. For example, Shanghai won her, but to a crude person like Xue Huai, she couldn't keep him in suspense. She had to be very straightforward in order for Xue Huai to understand. Fortunately, there was no one else here. The two of them were emperor and minister on the surface, but they were husband and wife in secret. There was nothing that couldn't be said. Wu Zetian said, "Master, think about it. The Tang Dynasty imperial family worships Taoism. Among the three religions, Taoism is number one. We believe in Buddhism. It was only after we came to power that Buddhism was able to hold its head high and vaguely surpass Taoism. Tell me, isn't this the way to protect the law?" Xue Huai pondered. Wu Zetian didn't let him think too much. She straightforwardly said, "It doesn't mean that we can be like that pure light deva and reincarnate as an emperor. Rather, we should say that we are that pure light deva. We are the Buddha's decree to reincarnate as an emperor and rule over the human world. Do you understand?" "Ah, Huai understands." How could Xue Huai not understand Wu Zetian's words? He nodded repeatedly. Wu Zetian said, "This Buddhist scripture is too simple. It's just a story of 100 words. The language is obscure and difficult to understand. How can it be used to teach the world? In our opinion, Master can gather a group of highly virtuous monks to write a commentary on this great cloud scripture. We can explain the Buddhist principles in detail and explain our intention to become emperor more clearly and clearly." Chapter 109. Xue Huai quickly replied, "Huai understands. Huai is really stupid to need the empress to teach me such an idea. When I return, I will follow the empress' instructions. In a few days, Huai will bring a copy of the Great Cloud Scripture for the empress to take a look." Wu Zetian smiled and cupped his cheeks. She gave him a light kiss and said, "Good man, I am already very happy that you are willing to share my worries. It doesn't matter if you do well or not, but it is enough that you have this intention." Xue Huai had not been summoned by Wu Zetian to serve him in bed recently. As Wu Zetian's gigolo and the uncrowned empress male concubine, he did not dare to touch women. As a strong man, he had long held it in. With Wu Zetian's gentle words, Xue Huai's lust was aroused. The little monk under his crotch rose, and was about to press Empress Wu down on the bed. Seeing his passionate gaze, Wu Zetian's heart couldn't help but itch a little. She leaned back, slightly, half leaning on the soft, embroidered tent. She squinted her eyes and glanced at Xue Huai. Xue Huai understood and was just about to stand up and take off his clothes when he heard someone call out from outside. Empress, Assistant Minister Qiu Guan Zhou Xing requests an audience. Xue Huai said angrily, "Tell him to wait." "Call him in." Wu Zetian sat up and fixed her messy hair. She glared at Xue Huai. Humans have all kinds of desires. It was unknown when it started, but in Wu Zetian's heart, the only thing that made her feel like she was on cloud nine was the desire to pursue power. Even though she was a little moved, Wu Zetian was not a person who could be troubled by emotions. She was not a woman who was bound by lust. The moment she heard about the important matter, she immediately regained her shrewdness and calmness. Wu Zetian comforted the indignant Xue Huai with a gentle voice. "Master, go to the back hall and rest for a while. Zhou Xing is here for something important." Hearing her words, Xue Huai knew that he still had a chance today. His anger turned to joy, and he nodded and strode to the rear hall. Wu Zetian tidied up her appearance and sat behind the table. She picked up a memorial and looked at the entrance of the hall with a pair of cold and dignified eyes. Following a series of footsteps, a pair of black satin boots stepped over the high threshold. A clear voice followed. "Assistant Minister Qiu Guan Zhou Xing pays his respects to the Empress." This was an official wearing a crimson robe. He was a third-ranked official of the Tang dynasty. Among the various ministers, only the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Appointments was a fourth-ranked official, while the other ministers were lower-ranked officials. The fourth-ranked officials wore crimson robes. As the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Xing naturally had to wear a scarlet official robe. Zhou Xing was just over 40 this year. He was of a moderate build, not fat or thin. His face was clear, and he had a pair of thick eyebrows that were slightly curved. His eyebrows were black and bright, like a sleeping silkworm. He had a pair of phoenix eyes and 3 strands of beard on his chin. He gave off the elegant and free air of a scholar, but his cheekbones were relatively high. Seeing Empress Wu, Zhou Xing hurriedly went forward to greet her. The so-called greeting was just a bow. At this time, the court did not have the ceremony of kneeling. When the emperor came to court, the officials all had seats. There would be meditation mats in the Golden Hall, and the officials would kneel to discuss politics with the emperor. Only in the Song dynasty, when Zhao Kuangyin ruled the country, did the seats get removed and the officials stood to discuss politics. But when they went to court, they still only bowed. It was only in the Yuan dynasty that they started to change to kneeling. Now, they did not always kneel. Wu Zetian waved her sleeve and said, "Assistant Minister, Zhou does not need to be so courteous. How is the case of Xiao Qiangjin going?" Zhou Xing took out a memorial from his sleeve. He bowed and said, "Empress, after this subject received the decree," he immediately interrogated Xiao Qiangjin, Gong Sai and Zhang Siming. The Luo province, Sima Gong Sai committed suicide to escape punishment. The Luo province magistrate Zhang Siming and Su Jingye's younger brother Xiao Qiangjin were afraid of the heavenly might and confessed to many accomplices. This subject did not dare to delay and immediately returned to report to the Empress. A cold light flashed through Wu Zetian's eyes. She reached out a hand. Zhou Xing immediately walked forward and presented the memorial. He respectfully said, "At the back there are the confessions of Xiao Qiangjin and Zhang Siming." Wu Zetian did not reply. She only opened the memorial and read it seriously. Seeing this, Zhou Xing took 2 steps back and bowed slightly. He stood at the side and waited for Empress Wu to ask questions. Zhou Xing was slightly nervous. He had brought down many people before, but this time among the people he wanted to bring down was his immediate superior, the Minister of Justice, Zhang Chujin. Wu Zetian had ordered him to investigate the case of Su Jingye's younger brother, Xiao Qiangjin. She had smuggled goods and wanted to use this case to purge the anti-martial royalists in the court. Zhou Xing had also smuggled goods and used the opportunity to drag his immediate superior, Zhang Chujin, into the case. Zhang Chujin was no ordinary person either. To be able to suppress someone like Zhou Xing, how could his means be ordinary? Zhang Chujin came from a large clan in Bing province and came from a family of officials. Ever since he was appointed as the Minister of Justice, he was known as a capable official. Zhou Xing had long wanted to push him down. If not for Zhang Chujin's impressive means, how would he be able to remain in his position? As an official in the Ministry of Justice, Zhang Chujin had more confidence than Zhou Xing, and his influence was greater than Zhou Xing's. Initially, Zhou Xing did not want to do it himself. He wanted to instruct his confidant, Yang Mingxing, to do it himself. However, something happened to Yang Mingxing. Zhou Xing was helpless and unwilling to give up on this good opportunity. He could only bite the bullet and do it himself. Zhang Chujin's political stance wasn't clear. He didn't support either Li or Wu. At present, Empress Wu was pulling one faction and fighting another. She was more tolerant towards the middle-of-the-road faction. Therefore, Zhou Xing wasn't sure if Empress Wu would agree to include Zhang Chujin in the anti-martial royalist faction. Wu Zetian carefully read through the contents of the memorial and did not even look at the confessions at the back. She was very clear about the actions of the few ruthless officials she had appointed. She was even more clear about the number of unjust and false cases that they had concocted in their hands. However, she needed these kind of lackeys right now, so naturally she would not go too far. Because of this, why would she bother to look at the confessions that were forced out of her through torture? Whether Zhang Siming and Xiao Qiangjin were afraid of death, couldn't stand torture, or wanted to frame others in order to avoid death, their motives weren't important. What was important was that under Zhou Xing's enticement, they were willing to expose those she wanted to get rid of. What she wanted to know was who was included in the purge list. Assistant Minister of the Phoenix Pavilion, Yuan Wanqing, the first name that came into view was that of the current Prime Minister. He was the only North Gate scholar who was still in the court. Seeing this name, Wu Zetian's pair of phoenix-like eyes narrowed slightly. She felt a trace of weakness. This was the confidant who had accompanied her through the stormy seas to seize the highest power. He had once made great contributions to her. But this softness only lasted for a moment. Then it became as cold as frost and snow. That well-maintained, white and tender hand gently picked up a brush, dipped it in cinnabar, and heavily ticked off that name. It was as if the past friendship, the ups and downs, the ups and downs, the ups and downs of these decades, from Zhao Yi to the Empress, and then to the Empress Dowager, were written off in one stroke. Assistant Minister of the Heavenly Official, Deng Xianting, was the second name. This person was extremely friendly with Shang Guanyi. Later on, he was friendly with the Prince of Runan, Li Wei, the Prince of Poyang, Li Ji, and others. Naturally, he was included in the purge list. Wu Zetian's face showed a hint of joy as she lightly ticked off the name. Imperial Censor Wei Yuanzhong was the third name. This person had once been the army supervisor and had defeated Su Jingye's rebel army. With this contribution, he should not be implicated. Empress Wu did not care how talented those who obstructed her path were. The more talented they were, the more she wanted to kill them. But she did not want to turn the world into a mess. Before she became emperor, she had to use this group of ruthless officials who knew how to bite. When she ruled the world in the future, she had to leave behind a few capable officials. But this person was very sympathetic to the nominal Emperor Li Dan. Now that the steps to change the world were getting tighter and tighter, if this person were to obstruct them at the crucial moment, Empress Wu thought for a moment and used the cinnabar brush to tick off one of his names. With just this, he could be spared from death. But banishment and demotion were unavoidable. Inner Custodian Zhang Guangfu, Shanzhou Provincial Governor Guo Jingyi, Pingzhou Provincial Governor Lu Yizong. These people were clearly on the side of the emperor. Without hesitation, Wu Zetian ticked off the names with her cinnabar brush. Every tick was a life. She did not even blink. When the cinnabar brush in her hand touched Minister Chiu, Zhang Chujin, she paused in surprise. Zhou Xing had been standing by the side, watching Empress Wu's actions. Seeing her brush stop, he quickly retracted his gaze and looked at his nose, pretending to not look sideways. Empress Wu thought for a moment. She was well aware that Zhou Xing was smuggling goods. This Zhang Chujin could be killed or not. He would not be an obstacle to her. But now that she was about to ascend the throne, she needed to use Zhou Xing as her trusted aide. If she wanted a dog to listen to her, she had to give him a bone. Thus, after a moment's thought, the cinnabar brush in her hand ticked down. A red mark appeared on the paper, like a sharp sword being unsheathed. Zhou Xing pretended to not look sideways, only looking at Empress Wu from the corner of his eyes. Seeing this, he could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Wu Zetian put down her cinnabar brush and said plainly, "My beloved subject is still very diligent in his work. However, these people have ulterior motives and are plotting something big. I'm afraid that their henchmen are not limited to these. My beloved subject must investigate them seriously to prevent any fish from escaping the net. There are already so many officials. Does Empress Dowager think that we have not killed enough?" Zhou Xing was secretly shocked. He knew that the scale of the purge had not reached the level that Empress Wu wanted. He quickly bowed and replied, "Yes, when I return, I will interrogate Zhang Siming and Xiao Qiangjin strictly. I will not let a single traitor escape the net." Empress Wu glanced at him and said with a smile that was not a smile, Since Zhang Chujin has betrayed my trust and colluded with traitors, the position of Minister Autumn official will be vacant. Do a good job. Other than you, I can't think of anyone else who is suitable for this position." Zhou Xing's face heated up. He knew that the Empress had seen through his thoughts. But hearing such an order, he was still overjoyed. He quickly bowed and thanked. "Empress Dowager trusts and promotes me. I will do my best until the day I die." Empress Wu plainly said, "You may leave." "Yes, I will take my leave." Zhou Xing bowed and left. When he reached the veranda, he felt the sun shining brightly and his body relaxed. At the same time, a question surfaced in his mind. Since the Empress could not wait to purge the officials, it was obvious that she was about to ascend the throne. But she was already so old and did not have many years left. If she wanted her career to last long, she would have to climb up another big tree. A new emperor was about to ascend the throne. Who would be the next emperor? Chapter 110. After Zhou Xing left, Xue Huai poked his head out from behind the screen and tiptoed out. When he saw the look in Wu Zetian's eyes, his heart turned cold. Wu Zetian's eyes were very clear, and she seemed to be deep in thought. She was clearly thinking about something. Sex was something that was very particular about mood. It wasn't like someone who had been thirsty for many years. Furthermore, for a woman like Empress Wu, love was just a spice to her. When she had her own considerations, why would she care about the love between a man and a woman? Xue Huai had served her for many years and knew her temperament well. Seeing her like this, he knew that he had no chance of being her guest today. Thus, he unhappily bid farewell to Empress Wu. Wu Zetian smiled apologetically at him and said gently, "Master, I have matters of state to consider. You should go back first and come visit me in 2 days." Xue Huai perked up and said, "Yes. The Empress is busy with state affairs and must take care of her body. Then, Huai will take his leave first." Xue Huai was about to leave when he suddenly remembered what Yang Fan told him. He hurriedly turned back and said, Oh, right, Empress. Huai has another matter that I would like to seek your approval on." Wu Zetian supported her chin with her palm and was deep in thought. When she heard him speak, she slightly raised her eyes and smiled. "What else does Master want to say?" Xue Huai said, "Empress, every year during the Lantern Festival, the palace will hold a grand celebration with various games such as kuju and bow striking. Huai has also formed teams for bow striking and sumo wrestling. During the Lantern Festival, if I can win a smile from the Empress, it will be a token of my sincerity. However, Huai's teams have just been formed and are not familiar with the competitions of the strong teams. If they were to lose miserably, it would be a loss of face. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy. Huai wants to compete with the teams that have won in the past so that the disciples can get used to it. Wu Zetian smiled. It's rare for you to show such sincerity. All right, who do you want to compete with? Huai's Kuju team was notorious for not abiding by the rules. Once they started a match, they would use sneak attacks, sprinkle lime, kick the groin. They simply did everything they could think of. Everyone in the capital knew about the White Horse Temple's bad style. Everyone knew about it. If Xue Huai still wanted to have fun and find a few teams to relieve his boredom, with his power he could find a few influential families and force them to compete with him. However, if he wanted to perform well in the palace, he needed real ability. If he wanted to compete with a truly strong team, he could not use force. Huai said, I would like to invite the princess's sumo wrestlers from the palace Kuja masters from the palace, and the palace, to compete from the palace to the palace to the palace. Wu Zetian laughed. Master's appetite is not small. You specifically challenged the strongest team of the Tang dynasty. Aren't you afraid of losing? She smiled and pondered for a while, then said, The Imperial Guard's Ju striking hand? Sure. When I get back, I will instruct Qiushinji to send the troops that are preparing to participate in the Shangyuan Ju striking hand to White Horse Temple to have a match with you. In the palace, no problem. In a few days, bring your Kuju masters to the palace and compete with them. I will tell Wan to arrange it. But Taiping, Wu Zetian sighed softly and said, Taiping hasn't been in a good mood recently. I don't think you should go and try to avoid this obstacle. There are many sumo masters in the Imperial Guard. Let Qiushinji send them to you. Xue Huai rushed back to White Horse Temple and immediately gathered a group of monks to explain the Empress' intention to them. In order to work together, the original abbot of White Horse Temple, the current elder of West Hall, Sanshan, was also invited. Sanshan, Sanjia, Santhin, Faming, Fajing, Jingjue, every one of them was a famous and virtuous monk. In order for Buddhism to suppress Taoism and become the #1 religion in the Central Plains, each of them became a charlatan and accompanied Feng Xiaobao, the ruffian, to change the scriptures. What the Empress meant was that there was no need to be secretive or bashful. She should directly say that she was the ruler of humanity who had come to the human world under the Buddha's decree. In other words, she was the pure light goddess. However, the goddess did not have a high status in the Buddhist world. She was clearly not worthy of Wu Zetian's position as the ruler of the Tang dynasty. Therefore, after a discussion among the monks, they decided to make some changes to the Great Cloud Sutra. In the sutra notes, it was stated that Empress Wu was the Maitreya Buddha in her previous life. She received the decree of Sakyamuni and was reincarnated as the ruler of the world. In the sutra notes, monk Jingjue directly translated the Sanskrit into the one who stole only the clouds is surnamed Wu. And this is the divine emperor's mother descends upon all nations and gives birth to millions of people. In a very blatant manner, he used the name of Buddha to make the divine emperor with the surname Wu to proclaim himself as the emperor and mother descends upon all nations. At that time, Wu Zetian was in control of the court. As a woman, and the Empress Dowager, the two biggest problems she faced if she wanted to proclaim herself as the emperor were the problem of her womanhood and surname. The emperor had always regarded himself as the son of heaven. If Empress Wu became the emperor, it would be the will of heaven. All these problems would naturally be solved. Faming and Fajing were responsible for making up various prophecies. Once these things were spread, the common people would be very willing to believe them. The prophecies they made up were very short in order to make it easier to spread. Each prophecy explained one problem, such as the reincarnation of the Maitreya Buddha as a woman, or the change of the surname Li to the surname Wu. The two eminent monks, Sanshan and Santhin, were responsible for collecting auspicious signs and warnings from various places. They forcefully linked them to Wu Zetian becoming the emperor. Not only did they list in detail all kinds of strange signs that appeared in various places in the Tang dynasty, such as a stone with a red heart, a rooster that could lay eggs, a stone that appeared in the Luo River, and so on. They even included earthquakes. They said that these were warnings from heaven and should be the evidence of Empress Wu becoming the emperor. Great Master Sen Jie became the chief editor. He was responsible for the final collation and proofreading of the things made up by these eminent monks. Speaking of which, although Xue Huai was ignorant and incompetent, his imagination was far beyond that of an ordinary person. He was lying on the bed alone, drinking wine and humming a little tune. Suddenly he slapped his head. He actually thought of an idea to help Empress Wu. He thought of a little song. The name of this song was Lady Wu Meinyang. Lady Wu Meinyang was a song that had existed for a long time. During the Sui dynasty and the early Tang dynasty, some records of palace banquets mention that this song was sung to liven things up. Apart from the fact that the name of this song coincided with the title Lady Wu bestowed upon Wu Zetian by Taizong, the two had nothing to do with each other at all. Xue Huai was also humming a tune randomly. When he was humming this tune, he thought of it. When Xue Huai brought up this idea, Great Master Sen Jie expressed his approval. Hence, he made up an easy-to-understand lyrics to accompany this tune. Xue Huai then arranged for people to sing it in the marketplace. With such a large group of monks busy in the meditation room, it was necessary to have someone by their side to take care of them. Moreover, they also needed someone who knew how to read. All the monks in the temple who were free were all sent over. Because there was a shortage of manpower, and monk Yizhuo was literate, Xue Huai also found him to be a strong man. Yizhuo was a Taoist. When he saw these sanctimonious Buddhist monks spouting nonsense, Taoism's position was in jeopardy. His heart ached and he felt very uncomfortable. Therefore, during the day, Yizhuo served the monks with soup and water, watching them spout nonsense. At night, he would use charcoal and waste paper to carefully record everything he saw and heard during the day. He even gave the things he wrote a name, records of the birth of the great cloud scripture. After writing a page, he would go into the pagoda forest and find a secret place to hide it. He would write it every day, waiting for the day when the ugly faces of these high monks would be exposed to the world. Those high monks would never have thought that they would have a Taoist spy by their side. Every day he would be unscrupulous and even indulge in his writing. Writing the scripture was not an easy task. Although they forcefully linked the matter of the pure light goddess with Wu Zetian to win the trust of the world, the more meticulous and realistic the scripture was, the better it would be. Once it was written, it had to be reconsidered. This was a long process. Xue Huai was illiterate. In the beginning, he was able to chat with them enthusiastically, but later on, even Xue Huai was confused. Gradually, he began to feel bored, so he entrusted this matter to San Jie, Faming, and a few other eminent monks, while he went to watch the disciples do the kuju. Wu Zetian had agreed to let the imperial guards practice and compete with them. With an internal decree, Qiu who was in Mengjin, naturally agreed. How could the empress' decree be disobeyed? Moreover, Qiu bow-striking experts were selected from the various imperial guards. They all had a certain background. Although the White Horse Temple was notorious, they would not dare to do anything too vile to compete with these people. Qiu was a bow-striking expert when he was young. When Li Shimin introduced bow-striking in the Tang dynasty, he was one of the main bow-striking experts in the Tang dynasty's imperial guards. Although he was old now, he was still good at it. Every year during the Lantern Festival, the imperial guards would participate in the bow-striking competition. He was the one who coordinated the bow-striking experts from each imperial guard and trained them together. In modern terms, he was the chief coach of the imperial guards' bow-striking team. We've seen too many officialdom dramas. It seems that high officials and nobles are more serious than the next, more serious than the next. It's like this in the officialdom, and it's also like this in life. To their friends, colleagues, and relatives, they all put on the airs of an official all day long, living like they're not human at all. In fact, when they drink, dance, talk, and laugh, they are no different from us. They also have many personal hobbies. Chioshinji was a person who loved bow striking. In his original plan, because the Lantern Festival was approaching, he had already planned to communicate with the other imperial guards to transfer their bow-striking experts and gather them together for training. Now that the decree from Empress Wu came, it was convenient for both sides. However, because the people he transferred were from various imperial guards, it would take a few days to gather them together. Xue Huai waited for 2 days, but Chioshinji still did not send anyone over. He could not wait any longer, so he took his people to the palace to find Shanghai Wanner. Chapter 111. Among Xue Huai's trusted disciples, there were a few who had followed him to the palace. Most of the others had never been there before. Therefore, they were all very excited to be able to enter the palace. They were full of curiosity about the most honorable place in the world. Ma Qiao was no exception. Although the palace was in Luoyang City and was very close to him, he had thought that he would never be able to step into that place in his entire life. But now he actually had the chance to enter the 9-layer imperial palace. It really felt like a dream. Yang Fan was also very nervous and a little excited. He didn't expect to have the opportunity to enter the palace so soon. Xue Huai had said that the Kuja masters in the palace were mostly women, such as princesses, female guards, and palace maids. Even Shangguan Daizhao was among them. Would he be able to see her this time? If he had the chance to see her, how would he be able to ask for the whereabouts of Miao Shinka? Because he was thinking about these questions, Yang Fan was a little silent. The others were discussing excitedly, guessing the situation in the palace or listening to the senior and junior brothers who had accompanied Xue Huai to the palace talk about the situation in the palace. Yang Fan's behavior was a little different from others. Chu Kuanga saw this and thought that he was too nervous because he was concerned about winning or losing. After all, these teams were all formed by Yang Fan. The outcome of the competition had the most to do with him. Therefore, it was understandable that his performance was unusual. Chu Kuanga hurried 2 steps forward and patted him on the shoulder, comforting him. "Erling, don't worry. How long have you and I trained these people? In the past, they were not qualified to compete in the palace. Now, as long as they can hold on for a little longer, it will be your great ability. Moreover, with your superb Kuja skills, I really don't believe that some women can be stronger than you." Yang Fan laughed and said, "Brother Chu is right. They are just a group of women. We are men. How can we be afraid of them?" The two of them chatted and laughed as they walked forward with their arms around each other's shoulders. When they were about to reach the Lushan Square, suddenly they saw a group of people on horses coming slowly from the opposite direction. In front of the group were several government officials who were beating the gong to open the way and playing the signboard to clear the way. Behind them, there were many government officials holding their sabers and following them. Luoyang Commandant Tang Zong rode on his horse with a saber in his hand. Behind him were many officials. Unexpectedly, Xue Huai led a group of monks towards them. The officials were startled and immediately retreated to the side of the road to let the group of monks pass. Yang Fan looked to the side of the road and saw several criminals being escorted by the officials. Among the prisoners, there were 2 prisoners with large shackles on their bodies. The shackles were 6 feet long, 4 feet wide, 5 CUN thick, and weighed 100 caddies. Wearing these shackles, not to mention walking, even if they were tied to a carriage, after a long time, they would die without a doubt. There were also a few people beside them who only wore light shackles, but they were wearing the clothes of prisoners on death row. There was even a beheading plaque on the back of their necks. All of them were tied up and their faces were ashen. Behind them, there were many men and women wearing prisoner clothes, wailing and cursing. They did not stop because of Xue Huai's arrival. They had already become prisoners on death row and would die in an instant. Who was there to be afraid of? Xue Huai was riding forward when he suddenly saw a few familiar faces among the prisoners. He couldn't help but stop his horse and take a closer look. He couldn't help but be surprised. Assistant Minister of the Phoenix Pavilion Yuan Wanqing, Assistant Minister of the Heavenly Official Deng Xianting, Inner Custodian Zhang Guangfu Shuehuai was secretly shocked. He quickly beckoned Tang Zong to come before him and asked in a low voice, "Why are these people all arrested? What did they do?" Tang Zong was originally very nervous when he saw Shuehuai pass by, but when he saw Shuehuai's friendly attitude, he couldn't help but feel relieved. He hurriedly cupped his hands and said, "Master Shui, these people are all related to Su Jingye's traitors. Now that they have been arrested, the Empress is furious and is about to send them to the execution ground." Shuehuai clicked his tongue. Suddenly he saw that Minister Qiu Guanzhang Chujin was also tied up. He couldn't help but ask, "Minister Zhang is an important official in the imperial court. Didn't he issue a pardon? Why is he also being tied up and sent to the execution ground?" This pardon was the legendary death exemption medallion. In fact, it wasn't a gold medallion but a pardon. The officials who received the pardon could be exempted from the death penalty once. There were only a dozen or so officials in the imperial court who had the pardon medallion. Shuehuai himself had one, so he asked this question. Tang Zong revealed a strange expression and said, "At the beginning of the year, Minister Zhang made a new law. He said that if someone committed a great crime of rebellion, even if he could be exempted from death with the pardon medallion, his family should also be severely punished. They could either be executed or be demoted to be servants as a warning to others." The Empress felt that it was very reasonable and allowed it. Who knew that even though Minister Zhang has the pardon medallion and can be exempted from death and sent to the desolate border, all the males in his family above the age of 15 will be beheaded. As for his wives, daughters, and maids, they will all be demoted to be servants in the palace. When Shuehuai heard this, he couldn't help but reveal a strange expression. After a while he said, "Isn't this lifting a rock and smashing it on his own feet?" Tang Zong deeply agreed. However, Zhang Shangjin was originally the highest official in the judicial department, so even though he ended up like this today, it wasn't good for him to comment. Shuehuai shook his head and sighed. The cycle of the heavenly Tao, retribution, is not good. After saying this, he kicked the horse's abdomen and walked forward. Yang Fan and Ma Chiao were currently bald and wearing monk robes. They were among the monks, but Tang Zong didn't dare to cause any trouble. He watched as a group of monks swaggered past in front of him. He didn't even dare to raise his head, so how could he recognize them? Chu Kuanga walked beside Yang Fan and couldn't help but sigh when he saw the miserable appearance of the condemned prisoners. Zhang Chujin thought of this law to cater to the Empress. Who would have thought that he would bring about his own destruction? Hong Yi said with a smile, "That's nothing. Do you see those two wearing the big chain? Those two are Su Jingye's younger brother, Xiao Kengjin, and Luoyang's magistrate, Zhang Siming. They were dragged to watch the execution. The big chain they wore was thought up by Zhang Siming. It was specially used to punish serious criminals. Now he himself has tasted the power of the big chain." When the ruffians heard this, they all sighed and spoke about the many stories they had heard about the cycle of karma and retribution. For a moment, these ruffians who fought and caused trouble everywhere seemed to be like monks who had seen through the world of mortals, and they all sighed with emotion. The monks of the White Horse Temple were led by Shuehuai into the palace through the Black Tortoise Gate. They then turned left and walked towards the peaceful blessing hall. In front of the peaceful blessing hall and the observation platform, there was a large, flat, and wide field. There was a basketball court here. This place was located to the north of the imperial harem. It was close to the imperial garden in the backyard of the palace. Many concubines, female officials, and palace maids lived nearby. Therefore, they often gathered here and played. Yang Fan and the others followed behind Shuehuai and entered the majestic palace. When they saw the magnificent imperial palace, Many people who entered the palace for the first time were in awe. Naturally, they didn't dare to speak loudly. They just looked around and curiously sized up everything they saw. In this palace garden, the most common thing they saw were women. Young, brightly dressed women walked back and forth. When they saw a group of bald monks coming in, they would curiously stop and look at them in groups of 3 or 5. They would whisper to each other. Occasionally, when they talked about some interesting topic, they would cover their mouths and laugh. When they laughed, their eyes would slightly curve into a pair of crescent moons, giving them a somewhat seductive feeling. Looking at them, the group of bald donkeys became restless. Xiao Fan, look, there are so many beautiful women. Ma Qiao came to Yang Fan's side and said with shining eyes. Yang Fan said, "What's so strange about this? Ordinary people's back gardens are planted with flowers. The emperor's back gardens are planted with women. What we see might not be a lot. In this palace, there are at least tens of thousands of women, and they are all selected from all over the world." Think about it. Ma Qiao imagined the scene of more than 10,000, 1 in a million beautiful girls gathered together, and his mouth immediately gaped wide open. He was about to plunge 3,000 feet straight into the abyss. The observatory was a high platform in Luoyang's imperial palace for observing the celestial phenomena. It had always been under the charge of the imperial astronomer. Usually, there were not many people here. When it was not needed, the palace gates would be locked. Because it was within the imperial palace, its safety was absolutely guaranteed. Therefore, there was not even a guard. The observatory and Serenity Hall intersected at a right angle, and in the middle was an extremely vast field. There was a Kuju field and other places for palace maids and eunuchs to play and exercise when they were free. As for the swings and fishing, they were in the rear gardens of the imperial palace, separated from this place by a palace wall that was 30 feet high. Xue Huai led them to the open field and ordered in a rough voice, "All of you wait here. I will go see the empress first and ask her to send some Kuja masters to compete with you." Xue Huai was just about to leave when he turned back with worry. Glaring at his restless ruffian disciples, he ordered, "This is the imperial palace. All of you behave yourselves." Hongyi hurriedly agreed with a smile. Xue Huai snorted heavily, turned around, and walked into the imperial palace. On the field, there were many palace maids holding hands as they walked and chatted. On the Kuju field, there were more than 10 palace maids playing football. When they saw more than 10 bald monks walking in and looking around, some palace maids came over and curiously sized them up. "Hey, old monk, you're already so old. Why are you still a novice monk?" A lively, round-faced palace maid looked at Taoist Yizhua. The old Taoist's face was full of wrinkles, and he was very old, but he was wearing an ordinary monk's robe. Squeezed in the middle of a group of young monks, he didn't look like a monk of any status. As she asked, the palace maid couldn't help but stretch out her hand as if she wanted to touch his goatee. Taoist Yizhua hurriedly took a step back, cupped his hands in front of his chest, and loudly said, "Supreme Heavenly Lord Tai, female benefactor, please don't do this." The palace maid was shocked. Her eyes widened, and she covered her mouth as she laughed. "Old monk, what kind of Buddha do you worship? Why are you chanting the Heavenly Lord of Taoism?" Taoist Yizhua's face turned red, and he was momentarily speechless. Beside him, a palace maid giggled and said, "Old monk, you're so useless. Look at that monk in the red kasaya. He's so young, but he's already the head of Buddhism." The round-faced palace maid followed her gaze and saw Yang Fan. Her eyes immediately turned red. Wow, what a handsome little monk. Chapter 112. Xue Huai was originally worried that his scoundrels wouldn't know the rules after entering the palace and would cause some trouble. He didn't expect these palace maids and beauties to be even more daring than these scoundrels. This was the palace, the home of the palace maids and beauties. They didn't have to worry that someone would dare to be rude to them. More importantly, they had a lot of people. Experienced people knew that if a person was thrown into a group of the opposite sex, even a rooster would become a quail. As a result, the monks became the target of the palace maids' and beauties' comments. They generously gave them pointers and giggled from time to time. Even the most ruffian and scoundrel monks became a little reserved under their giggles. Usually, when these monks went out on the streets and saw some pretty girls and wives, they would often point at them and make comments about them. But now, there were several times more women than them, and all of them were beautiful, young, and lively girls. They were at a loss of what to do. The one who received the most attention was, of course, the handsome young monk Yang Fan. Many of the palace maids' eyes were red and sparkled as they looked at him. Yang Fan, on the other hand, was looking at the women playing football in the field. These women were fighting too fiercely. Although they knew that a group of monks had come to the palace, they couldn't find the time to watch the fun. They wore light green shirts with large lapels and narrow sleeves. Their shirts reached their knees and were tied tightly with belts that bound their slender waists. 2 straps hung down from their waists and stuck to their perky buttocks. As they ran, the straps bounced and slapped their plump buttocks. They all wore a pair of striped skinny pants that were the same color as their shirts. Some of the pants were tied up, while others were stuffed into their boots. The palace maids tied up their pants because they wore a pair of wooden clogs on their feet and had no boots to stuff in. From this, one could also infer their general status in the palace, because playing football required a lot of shoes. In that era, there were no football shoes or rubber-soled shoes. Whether it was cloth shoes or leather shoes, they were not particularly sturdy. After a game of football, the shoes with poor quality would become a joke, and the shoes with good quality would also have some places where they would fall off. Although it was the prosperous era of the Tang dynasty, most people didn't have to worry about food and clothing. However, not having to worry about food and clothing didn't mean everything. At that time, the handicraft industry wasn't developed. Shoes had to be made one needle at a time. Making shoes was more time-consuming than making clothes, so it wasn't cheap. Therefore, unless one was rich, most people played football barefoot or wore wooden clogs. After all, the palace maids were girls, so it was impossible for them to play football barefoot. Therefore, those with high status and high salary would wear boots, while the other palace maids wore wooden clogs. The feeling of wooden clogs was far less sensitive than cloth shoes or leather boots, so they were at a disadvantage when playing football. Therefore, even if their skills were similar, or even if your skills were slightly better, the person wearing wooden clogs would still be slightly worse than the person wearing cloth shoes or leather boots. However, among the dozen or so people playing football on the field at that moment, the one with the best skills was clearly a girl wearing wooden clogs. If she changed into a pair of leather boots, what would her skills be like? Yang Fan was looking at her. This time, Yang Fan entered the palace to compare his skills with the Kuja masters in the palace. This was directly related to whether he would be able to enter the palace often in the future and have the opportunity to meet a big shot like Shanghai Warner. Therefore, he paid special attention to the Kuja masters in the palace. This girl wearing wooden clogs had her hair combed into 3 servant girls. She was quiet and beautiful. She was also wearing a green shirt and trousers, and on her body, she exuded a kind of vigorous and neat feeling. Her feet were wearing a pair of simple wooden clogs, and the rubber ball was on the tip of her foot. No matter what she did, the ball never left her foot, and her feet never left the ball. Her skills were truly superb. They were playing for nothing. Playing for nothing meant that there was no goal. It was a competition game that focused purely on footwork skills. It required extremely high control of the feet, and after playing for a game, it consumed a lot of physical strength. In the Tang dynasty, it could be said that the whole nation played football. From the emperor's imperial concubines, princes and nobles to the common people and footmen, everyone loved to play for a long time. In such an atmosphere, there were many hardcore fans like Xue Huai, and there were also many people with superb skills. None of the palace maids on the field were weak. It was especially rare for this girl wearing wooden clogs to be able to beat the group of palace maids. This girl was Siemuin. Among the female officials, female guards, and palace maids in the palace, she could be considered a rich woman. The reason why she still wore wooden clogs to play was that she was used to saving money, and earning money again. Nyo was afraid of living a hard life. She couldn't wait to earn all the money that she and her brother wouldn't be able to spend for 3 lifetimes in one go. Because of this, she was nicknamed Little Miser among her sisters. Yang Fan noticed her because of her superb skills, and then began to look at her. After looking at her for a while, Yang Fan faintly felt a sense of familiarity. Although Xia Xiaoman's current attire was a far cry from the fairy-like image from that night, beautiful women were always unforgettable, especially her heroic eyebrows. Yang Fan suddenly remembered her. That night, he had seen this girl while writing on the wall. She really was a person of the imperial court and a person of the palace. Could it be that she recognized him? Xia Xiaoman seemed to be aware that someone was staring at her. She suddenly tiptoed, and the ball that seemed to be glued to the tip of her foot soared into the sky. She didn't seem to use much strength in this kick, but it actually kicked the ball so high. This move was similar to the one that Yang Fan used to hit the ball into the net from the center line on the Luo River. The only difference was that one used a hand and the other used a foot. Being able to exert the greatest strength did not necessarily mean that one could shoot the most powerful ball. Relying solely on brute force, it was likely that the ball itself would have to bear all of the force. Xia Xiaoman kicked the ball away and looked over. She saw a handsome monk wearing a large red robe, but he was unreasonably young and handsome. He was looking at her with a sneaky expression. She was immediately displeased and fiercely glared at him. She didn't recognize Yang Fan. In the ancient records, the person with the highest ability to remember people was a man named Ing Feng. Because of this, the idiom "half a face to face" was left behind. It was said that Ing Feng had an amazing memory. Once he went to visit an official, but the official was not at home. At that time, the coachman only opened the door a crack, and Ing Feng only saw half of the coachman's face. Decades later, when they met again, Ing Feng was still able to recognize him at a glance. Of course, Xia Xiaoman was not such a strange person. Although she was not face-blind, she was not good at remembering other people's faces. That night, Yang Fan was hiding under the treetops. The light was dim, and Xiaoman would not deliberately look at a thief. Now that this thief had shaved his head and was wearing a kasaya, his appearance was too different from that night. She could not recognize him. As for the image of his childhood, it was even more different now. At that time, Yang Fan's face was sallow and emaciated. His hair was unkempt, and his face was bruised and swollen. Needless to say, their circumstances had changed too much. Adequate nutrition, a comfortable life, coupled with martial arts practice and the way they dressed, it made their physical appearance and mental temperament undergo earth-shaking changes. Not only did a girl change 18 times from childhood to womanhood, a man grew up from a child to a young man. His living environment was also like heaven and earth, so the changes in his appearance were also earth-shaking. Nyo did not know that the lecherous, smelly monk in front of her was the elder brother she had been looking for thousands of times. Even if Yang Fan broke his head, he would never think that this beautiful and pretty little female guard was the same ugly Nyo who had a bird's nest hairstyle and small open teeth. At this time, the ball that seemed to go straight into the clouds fell from the sky and landed 3 feet in front of Yang Fan. With Xia Xiaoman's ball control ability, how could she not know where the ball was going to land? It seems that when she kicked the ball into the air, she had deliberately chosen this landing point to scare the monk who was looking at her rudely. The group of palace maids gathered around Xia Xiaoman had just looked up when Yang Fan noticed something strange. He looked up and saw the ball falling from the sky. Yang Fan's feet stopped, and his pair of Luohan shoes sprang up. His whole body spun up. His big red kasaya was like a red lotus blooming from the water because of his rapid spin, spreading out in all directions. Yang Fan's foot flew out and hit the ball in the middle. The ball flew out and turned into a long rainbow, penetrating into the eye of the wind. The eye of the wind was the goal. There was a goal on the left and right side of the field. The shape of the goal was like a memorial arch, but it was much shorter than the memorial arch. The goal was made of red painted wood, with cloud eaves on both sides and a pointed ball at the top of the middle. It was somewhat in the style of Western regions architecture. Below it was the goal, which was about the height of a person, similar to the modern goal. But according to different play styles, not all the ball had to enter this goal to score. Above the goal was not one beam, but two beams. In the middle of the two beams there was a smaller goal, shaped like a window on the wall of an ancient garden. This hole was called the eye of the wind. In some of the more difficult games, the ball had to enter this hole to win, and to shoot into the eye of the wind was several times more difficult than shooting into the larger goal below. Yang Fan's volley accurately and powerfully went straight into the goal. Moreover, he was on the side of the field, and due to the angle, it made it even more difficult to shoot. For a moment, the monks and palace maids who witnessed this scene could not help but cheer. Although Yang Fan had not competed with a real strong team in kickboxing, he had a general understanding of his own kickboxing skills. So when he saw the female palace guard he had seen before, he knew that she must be an expert in kickboxing from the imperial palace. In a moment, he would compete with an expert from the imperial palace, and this person was likely to be a strong opponent, so he intended to give her a head-on blow. When Xie Xiaoman saw his volley, her eyes could not help but shine. What a good monk! I can't underestimate him. For a moment, Xie Xiaoman looked at Yang Fan, her eyes cold, a faint desire to fight. Chapter 113. 17. Good Kung Fu. Ha ha ha, that was a wonderful shot. Yang Fan kicked a good ball, and Big Brother Hong Yi felt very proud. He patted Yang Fan's shoulder and laughed exaggeratedly. He purposely made his voice louder so that more palace maids and beauties could hear him. Sister Xiaoman, where did these monks come from? A little palace maid came to Xiemuwen's side and asked in a low voice. Xiemuwen looked at the monks and said, "Other than Master Shui, who else could bring so many monks to the palace?" The little palace maid was surprised and said, "What are they doing here? Are they going to perform a big ceremony?" Xiemuwen laughed in spite of herself and said, "You are indulging in fantasy. If you want to know, just ask them." Okay. The little palace maid agreed and ran to Hong Yi and Yang Fan's group. "Hey, you monks, what are you doing here?" The little palace maid put her hands on her slender waist and asked fiercely. This little girl was not very old, about 14 or 15 years old. She was very pretty and had a natural baby face. Although her almond-shaped eyes were wide open and she looked unhappy, she still looked sweet and cute. This was what it meant to be happy and angry at the same time. Hong Lu puffed out his chest, put his hands on his waist, and said with his nose in the air, "I have long heard that there are many martial arts masters in the palace. The White Horse Temple came to the palace today to compete with you in martial arts." As soon as Hong Lu said this, it immediately caused an uproar. The palace maids whispered to each other excitedly. From the looks of it, they were usually trapped in the palace and bored to death. Having a little fun was more joyous than anything else. Of course, this also stemmed from their strong self-confidence. Every year at the Lantern Festival, they would always be the champions. The monks of the White Horse Temple came to the palace to be tortured. More and more palace maids and beauties heard the news, and they all gathered around, asking the others. Once they knew the news was true, they immediately became excited. At this time, Shui Huai had already seen Wu Zetian and presented the Great Cloud Scripture in his sleeve. Those highly virtuous monks were usually good at specious gathas. This time, for this commentary on the Great Cloud Sutra, they were far-fetched and produced a large number of gathas and prophecies. They gave full play to their imagination and made use of every sentence in the Great Cloud Sutra that could be used. Wu Zetian looked at the Great Cloud Scripture seriously. She saw that they used the Great Cloud Scripture as a basis and continuously analyzed and researched it. They actually came to the conclusion that the Maitreya Buddha was the reincarnated female and became the master of this world. They even directly pointed out that the Maitreya Buddha's reincarnated female surname was Wu. She couldn't help but feel delighted. Sure really did not disappoint my expectations. Wu Zetian smiled as she put down the Great Cloud Scripture and said to Wanner, who was standing to the side, "Keep it first and choose an auspicious time to distribute the Great Cloud Scripture and Great Cloud Scripture to the world. When the time comes, all the major temples in each province must collect a copy and invite all the monks to preach." Wanner agreed. Wu Zetian said to Xue Huai, "This move, Asher's contribution, cannot go unnoticed. How many people are there to translate this Great Cloud Scripture?" Xue Huai said, "There are Sanjia, Santhin, Sanshan, Fa Ming, Yuan Qi, and the other 9 monks." Wu Ze said, "Good. Including Asher, there are 10 people. I will give each of you a purple kasaya and a silver fish pouch as a reward." Because the Tang dynasty used color as part of the official uniform, there were restrictions on the color of the kasaya for monks. Purple was a color that only officials of the 3rd rank and above could wear. So no matter which temple the monks were, they could not wear a purple kasaya. Now, Wu Zetian gave each of them a purple kasaya. This was an unprecedented treatment. Xue Huai was overjoyed and quickly thanked her. Wu Zetian smiled and said, "Asher is considerate. I am giving you a purple kasaya, but I think it is too little." Xue Huai hurriedly said, "Huai is a boorish person. I don't have any other thoughts. I only think about how to make the Heavenly Empress happy. Huai's heart is happy. Since this sutra can satisfy the Heavenly Empress wishes, that's the best. I am not afraid that Heavenly Empress will laugh at me." On the way here, Xiao Bao was afraid that this scripture would not be accepted by Heavenly Empress and was very nervous. Wu Zetian looked at him with a smile and said, "I am a little tired and want to go back to my bedroom to rest. Sure, come with me. Tell us about the Great Cloud Scripture to calm our minds." Xue Huai quickly said, "Yes, Huai will obey." "Oh, the day before yesterday, Huai told Heavenly Empress that he will bring the monks of White Horse Temple to compete with the palace's martial arts masters. Now they are waiting in the martial arts field under the observation platform. Heavenly Empress, what do you think?" Wu Zetian said, "Wanner, the Lantern Festival is approaching. Have the palace's martial arts masters started to practice?" Shangguan Wanner bowed and said yes. "I've also tried my best to get some of the people who have official positions to work with so that they can take some time out to participate in the practice. I'm looking forward to the Spring Lantern Festival to win the championship of the Kuju Championship for the palace. Now, the Kuju players are basically all gathered." Wu Zetian smiled and said, "Asher ordered the monks of White Horse Temple to practice martial arts to make me happy. It must have been hard on him. Go and tell the people in the palace to compete with the monks of White Horse Temple. Wanner will obey." Shanghai Wanner bowed and answered, then quietly left. Xue Huai had been standing there with one hand clasped together. When Shanghai Wanner left, he quickly stepped forward and gently held Wu Zetian's arm. He called out anxiously, "Heavenly Empress." Wu Zetian coquettishly rolled her eyes at him and accompanied him to the bedroom. On the court, the palace maids who had gathered around ridiculed the monks of White Horse Temple. The baby-faced girl raised her chin and said disdainfully, "You want to compete with us? What a joke. Every year in the Lantern Festival, we, the palace martial arts masters, want to win the championship. You don't even have the qualifications to enter the palace to compete, yet you have the nerve to compete with us." Hong Lu blushed and said, "That's because a good man doesn't fight with a woman." Everyone gave way to you. Otherwise, do you think you can win with your flowery fists and impractical kicks? Who would believe that? The girl said angrily, Who said someone let us win? Sister Xiaoman, come. Let's teach them a lesson and let them know how powerful we are. Hong Lu rolled his eyes and said, You little girl, what a big tone. Who are you? How dare you talk to us like this? The girl said proudly, I dare to say this because I have the ability. I am Lan Yiqing, a female guard of the palace. Remember this well. In a while, we will talk under our feet. See if I don't beat you up. Ma Qiao said to Yang Fan, Lan Yiqing, this name is really nice. The name is nice, and the person is also beautiful. Yang Fan rolled her eyes at him and said, Master Hong Shiba. She is a female guard of the palace. You have no hope. It's better to put away your mortal heart. Ma Qiao snorted and didn't say anything. He also knew that it was impossible for him to pursue such a girl. However, everyone loved beauty. This girl called Lan Yiqing was fresh and pleasant, pure and sweet. She was like an apricot that had just released its fragrance. It suited his taste very well, so he couldn't help but admire her. While Hong Lu and Lan Yiqing were quarreling, Shanghai Wanner had already left Jixin Palace Hall and rushed to the backyard. As soon as she came out of Jixin Palace Hall, she saw a young man who looked like scribes coming slowly. This person wore a turban on his head and wore a stone blue silk robe with a leather belt around his waist. He had red eyebrows and white teeth. He had an elegant demeanor. When she looked carefully, it was Princess Taiping who was disguised as a man. Shanghai Wanna stopped and bowed slightly. She said with a smile, Princess, how come you have time to come to the palace today? As soon as Princess Taiping saw her, she couldn't help but chuckle. She greeted her with a smile and asked, Wanna, you are here. Is Anyang in the hall? Shanghai Wanner said, The Empress is a little tired. She has returned to her bedroom to rest. She is listening to some scriptures to calm her mind. Princess Taiping knew what was going on. Oh, she said, if that's the case, I'll go back. Shanghai Wanner quickly stopped her and said with a smile, Since Princess has come, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Teacher Xue has brought a group of disciples into the palace. He said that he has been practicing Kuja hard. He wants to participate in the Yuan Dynasty tournament and compete with us for the championship. Now, he wants to compete with our forbidden sex Kuja masters. Wanner is going to arrange some people to compete with them. If Princess has nothing else to do, why don't you come with us? Princess Taiping heard this and said with disdain, Xue Huaiyi subordinates are just a bunch of ruffians. What kind of Kuja masters do they have? Even though she said that, she still followed Shanghai Wanner to the backyard. In the backyard, the two sides were still bickering. A group of palace maids were chattering nonstop. The ruffians and monks were speechless. Suddenly, one of the palace maids ran over and shouted, Shaman Jijia, Yiqing Mimi, don't quarrel anymore. Shangguan Dai Zhao is here. Dai Zhao said that he wants us to compete with White Horse Temple. Xie Xiaoman was surprised. Shangguan Dai Zhao also knows about this? The palace maid said this matter has been approved by the Empress. Shangguan Dai Zhao is here for this matter. Look. The palace maid pointed behind her. Everyone followed her gaze and saw two men in white robes standing shoulder to shoulder on one side of the field. Someone called out, Ah, Princess Taiping is also here. Yang Fan listened attentively and saw two people standing shoulder to shoulder on the other side of the field. Both were wearing Confucian robes. Their lips were painted red, their noses were greasy, their skin was delicate, and their skin was white with a hint of red. Standing there, they looked like a pair of lovers. If these two were to change into women's clothes, perhaps even Shizi Fian would not be able to compare. Carefully looking at their appearance, he remembered that the one on the left was the Princess Taiping, whom he met by chance at the Luo River. As for the other one, she was as beautiful as a jade. Yang Fan vaguely remembered that he had seen her at the Luo River. At that time, she was standing next to Princess Taiping. So she was Shangguanwaner. Yang Fan did not expect that the person he had tried so hard to meet was someone he had already met at the Luo River that day. It was just that he did not know who she was. Only today did he see her true face. Chapter 114. Shangguanwan, did not approach. Although she was respectful to Xue Huai on the surface, she was very disdainful or even disgusted with him. At the moment, Xue Huai was not here, so Shangguanwan did not need to show any respect to his subordinates. Shangguanwan said to Xiamuin from afar, "Xiaoman, you and the others have a match. The princess and I will watch the match from here. Pay attention. Don't let the reputation of the palace weaken." While speaking, a group of eunuchs carrying all kinds of things came over. The screen was pulled down, and in the blink of an eye, a place that looked like a tent was set up, and then 2 rope beds were put in. These rope beds were the same as Hu beds. Both came from the western regions. Although there was a word bed in its name, it was actually a chair. This kind of chair with high legs and armrests was somewhat similar to the armchairs and armchairs. It had been introduced to the Central Plains since the Han Dynasty, but it had never become the mainstream of household furniture. But outside, the nobles had to agree that this kind of furniture was more suitable than the traditional furniture of the Central Plains. At least in the army, Hu beds, stools, had become very popular. There were also rope beds in the palace. Generally, when the members of the royal family held some grand events outside the palace hall, the traditional seat was too low, so they would use this kind of furniture from the western regions. After the rope beds were put in place, a few tables were placed between the 2 rope beds. Then hot tea, fresh fruits, cold dishes, and snacks were placed on the tables, one by one. Princess Taiping and Shangguanwan sat on the left and right. They first took a wet towel to wipe their hands and face, then took a hot cheese, picked up some raisins, and put on a look as if they were watching the fun. In the palace, apart from the Empress, only these 2 people could put on such a show. Even the Empress was not as eye-catching. Seeing that Princess Taiping and Shangguan Daizhao were sitting on the side of the field, wanting to watch the match, although Xie Xiaoman did not put the monks of the White Horse Temple in her eyes, she could not help but be excited. The palace maids and female guards were eager to participate in the match. Lan Yiqing waved his arms and said, "Sisters, cheer up. Let the monks of White Horse Temple know how powerful we are." Xie Xiaoman had always been friends with them, so she had a good idea of who was better. She picked out 9 of her friends, and with her there were 10 of them. Xie Xiaoman still didn't take the monks of the White Horse Temple seriously. In her haste, she didn't deliberately find the best football players. At least Princess Taiping and Shangguan Daizhao were first-class kuja masters, but the 2 of them did not participate. But Xie Xiaoman still picked out the best players among the female guards present. Among these 10 people, besides her, there were 3 female guards, including Lan Yiqing. The other 6 were just ordinary palace maids. The quality of one's ball skills was not directly related to one's martial arts. Those who were good at martial arts would naturally have better physical fitness, but that was only one of the basic elements of playing basketball. It did not mean that they would be able to practice superb skills and make the most accurate judgments according to the ever-changing situation on the court. Therefore, although there were a few female guards present who had superb martial arts, their ability to play with the light ball under their feet was very average. They usually did not practice seriously. Occasionally, they came to play ball to relieve boredom. Their ball skills were very average, so they were not selected by Xie Xiaoman. Xue Huai was not here, so the White Horse Temple naturally had Yang Fan as the leader. Under the arrangement of Yang Fan, a total of 9 members, including Chu Kuanga, Hong 1, Hong 6, Ma Qiao, were selected. Including him, there were a total of 10 people ready to play. There was no point in hiding their strength. In this kind of game, the deciding factor was strength. Even if one's playing style was different, how strange could it be? Once on the field, the competition was always the most basic things: ball control, dribbling, passing, shooting, and so on. Letting those who were really good at Kuju stand on the sidelines and watch was absolutely not as good as letting them go on the field and fight with their opponents. Although Yang Fan had never practiced Kuju before, he understood this principle. So he did not hide anything and sent all the best players on the field. Because this was a competition, it was no longer a performance of free play. So the palace maids and eunuchs had already cleared the field. They did not use a single goal, but a double goal. This kind of play was the most intense kind of play. The monks had already put on short martial arts clothes under their monk robes. Now that their monk robes were loosened, they all walked onto the field one by one and moved their hands and feet. Lan Yiqing stood on the opposite side and proudly raised his chin, looking at the monks' movements with disdain. Xie Xiaoman moved her hands and feet and whispered to her, "Those who come have bad intentions. Those who are kind don't come. If they dare to come to Kuju, they must have something to rely on. Don't be careless." Lan Yiqing looked back and smiled. "Sister Xiaoman, don't worry. We won't let these stinky monks take advantage of us." Xie Xiaoman nodded and said to Gaoying, "Keep an eye on the monk in the red robe. Among these people, I'm afraid he is the most skilled." Gaoying nodded and stared at Yang Fan with her pair of limpid eyes. Kuju began. It was 10 months on the field. The fragrant wind blew down 2 beautiful women. Sweat stained their faces and dew. Dust brushed their eyebrows. Their green sleeves hung low and covered the jade bamboo shoots. Their red skirts swayed with dew. Their children would kick away their delicate and beautiful chong in youth. Competitions with girls participating were always particularly pleasing to the eye. If these girls were young and beautiful, watching their vigorous and beautiful figures running on the field and listening to their melodious shouts like silver bells, it was really a very pleasant enjoyment. However, the 10 Buddhist team members didn't feel the same way. As soon as the game began, they felt the power of these palace maids. Each of them moved like the wind and were agile, catching them off guard. Kuju at that time was actually much more barbaric than modern football. Some reasonable collision movements were even more skillful than these monks. As soon as the game began, these closed-door monks were beaten to a pulp by these tigresses. Who would have thought that each of these delicate girls would be so powerful? Steady, retreat, and defend. Get used to their style of play first. Yang Fan shouted. He and Chu Kuanga took the position of 2 vanguards, one on the left and the other on the right. They forcibly intercepted the opponent's offensive. Only then did the other team members retreat to their own half of the field. The disrupted formation was slightly restored. Damn it, we are a group of men. How can we be defeated by a group of little girls? Brothers, let's fight back. Hangi, who had calmed down, shouted in exasperation. Unfortunately, only his subordinates responded to him. The monks who were standing on the sidelines waving their fists and cheering had long been drowned out by the cheers of the palace maids and eunuchs. They had no choice but to fight in an away game. Yang Fan intercepted the ball and stepped on it. He glanced at Chu Kuanga on the left and said in a deep voice, "Brother Chu, let's fight side by side. Let's show them how powerful we are." Chu Kuanga laughed. "I have only left the imperial army for a few years. I didn't expect that Kuju would change." "Good. The 2 of us. Let's show off the might of men. Kill." Lan Yiqing wrinkled her little nose and said, "Don't brag. Bring it on." Yang Fan laughed, and with a push of his toes his body turned with the ball. He moved left and right like a ghost. Lan Yiqing's kick missed, and Yang Fan had already flashed past her. Just as he was about to run, a figure flashed in front of him. A beautiful figure stood in front of him and sneered, "If you want to pass, you have to get through me first." The person who came was the female guard Gaoying. Yang Fan dribbled the ball and rushed left and right. He used 5 feints in a row, but none of them fooled her. Gao Ying's lower body was extremely stable. She followed him like a shadow and always blocked in front of him. At this time, Lan Yiqing also jumped to grab the ball and formed a pincer attack. When Yang Fan saw this, he immediately shouted, "Catch!" Yang Fan kicked the ball, and the ball suddenly swept past Gao Ying's left shoulder and fell straight in front of Chu Kuanga. Chu Kuanga ran with all his strength, faster than a galloping horse. He rushed with all his strength to grab the landing point of the ball. When he was just a step away, a figure flew in the air, and with a spin kick, the ball was kicked back before it landed at Lan Yiqing's feet. The person floated down, and two bright and heroic eyebrows raised provocatively at Chu Kuanga. It was Xie Xiaoman. Lan Yiqing took advantage of the fact that the monk team's two main players, Yang Fan and Chu Kuanga, were in her own half of the court. She rushed forward with the ball, passing Hong 1 and Hong 9 in a row, getting closer and closer to the goal. At this time, because she had passed two people in a row, she could not control the strength of the ball well. She used her foot, but she did not control the angle well, and the ball bounced forward 2 feet. Lan Yiqing was anxious, and just as she was about to jump to get the ball back, a big foot circled the ball at her feet. Lan Yiqing looked up angrily and saw a person in front of her. Because her ball had been broken, his face was nervous and excited. It was Ma Qiao. "Pass the ball. Pass the ball. 18, pass the ball." A few monks saw the opponent's General Gao Ying rushing out like an arrow and was about to pounce on him, so they hurriedly shouted at Ma Qiao. Ma Qiao ignored them and smiled at the little beauty opposite him. "Hello, Miss Lan." The little girl's willowy eyebrows were raised, and she fiercely said, "Hello, my ass! Give me the ball." "Oh!" The beauty's coquettish voice was unique, and Ma Qiao's heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, he subconsciously kicked the ball, and the ball was at Miss Lan's feet. "Aya!" When the ball was kicked, only then did Ma Qiao realize that something was wrong. He wanted to snatch the ball back, but it was too late. Gao Ying was originally rushing towards Ma Qiao, but when she saw the ball at Lan Yiqing's feet, she immediately changed her direction and rushed towards the monk's goal. At this time, she used the lightness skill of 8 steps, overtaking Cicada. Her figure rose and fell as if she was flying, and at the same time she shouted, "Xiao Qing, pass the ball!" This was a rare opportunity, so how could she not take advantage of it? If it wasn't for this good opportunity, she wouldn't have used the lightness skill so easily. Martial arts could strengthen a person's physique, but it couldn't turn a person into a god. This kind of thing that relied on explosive force couldn't be used more than a few times, or else the arena would really become a paradise for martial arts experts. For example, a person could use explosive force to lift up a boulder that weighed 700 or 800 caddies, or even 1,000 caddies, and throw it more than 10 feet away. However, if you gave him a sword that weighed 3 caddies and asked him to lift it for 4 hours, he wouldn't be able to do it. This lightness skill could also suddenly increase a person's speed in a short period of time. In that instant, it wasn't impossible to catch up to a galloping horse. However, if you asked him to run at this speed for an hour, he wouldn't be able to finish it even if you chopped his head off. Therefore, if it wasn't for the fact that this opportunity was hard to come by, Miss Gao Ying would also conserve her strength and not waste it easily. Lan Yiqing didn't expect this idiot to be so slow-witted. The ball passed to her feet, and she was stunned for a moment. Then, she heard Gao Ying shout, and she came to her senses. She hurriedly dribbled the ball, past Ma Qiao. Hong Yi and the others rushed over angrily, but before they could form an encirclement, Lan Yiqing had already passed the ball to Gao Ying. Chapter 115. Gao Ying's figure paused for a moment, then she volleyed the ball into the net and into the eye of the wind. Thunderous cheers immediately broke out on and off the field. The Inner Palace team had taken the lead. Hong Yi was so angry that his mouth and eyes were crooked. He glared at Ma Qiao and said, "Which side are you on? Why did you pass the ball to that little girl?" Ma Qiao had just passed the ball to her unconsciously when the little beauty glared at him. At this moment, he was filled with regret and couldn't say anything. Hong Lu rushed over and scolded, "You bastard! Add 3 more levels and beat him up. A group of big monks swarmed over and held Ma Qiao down, punching and kicking him. Ma Qiao hugged his head and squatted on the ground, crying out, "Isn't it just a ball? What's so great about giving it to her?" Hong Yi was also furious when he heard this. He immediately rolled up his sleeves and joined in the fight. When the palace maids and guards saw this, they all covered their mouths and laughed. On the sidelines, Princess Taiping couldn't help but smile when she saw this scene. She said to Shanghai Wan "Shui Huai is used to making trouble. Now he wants to participate in the Upper Yuan Kuju competition. Does he really think he can do it with this group of people?" She couldn't help but shake her head as she said this. Shanghai Wan said, "Ling Yue, they may not all be masters, but there are many masters among them. Look at that burly man. Even though his Kuja skills are slightly inferior to yours and mine, they're not far off. As for the other one," Shanghai Wan Er's gaze was fixed on Yang Fan. She said softly, "I'm afraid that little monk is a bit more brilliant than you and me." Oh. Originally, Princess Taiping was in a bad mood and did not pay much attention to the process of the game until Ma Qiao voluntarily gave up the ball and was beaten by his own team members, which aroused her attention. At this time, hearing the words of Shanghai Wanner, she followed her gaze and her eyes fell on Yang Fan. Yang Fan had shaved his head and was wearing a monk's robe. His appearance was very different from that day when he was wearing embroidered clothes and a small hat, but his facial features were the same. Shanghai Wan was the first to notice his superb skills, but she did not recognize that this monk was the man wearing embroidered clothes and a small hat that day. But Princess Taiping was different, because Yang Fan's temperament and charm had left a deep impression on her. She only needed a glance to recognize this person. It was him. Why did he become a monk? Princess Taiping cried out in surprise. Shanghai Wana looked at her in surprise and asked, "What's wrong?" Princess Taiping shook her head and stared at Yang Fan without blinking. Shanghai Wan felt a bit strange. She could not help but look at Yang Fan a few times. Vaguely, she also felt that he looked familiar. The game continued. Princess Taiping was no longer casually watching the game like before. She watched very seriously. After watching for a long time, she could not help but say to Shanghai Wan, "His Kuja skill is indeed better than you and me." Shanghai Wana said, "What do you think? How is he compared to Xiao Man?" Princess Taiping looked seriously for a while and slowly said, "Now he is on par with Xiao Man. If he really participates in the Lantern Festival, his skill will be better than Xiao Man's." Shanghai Wana frowned and said, "How can it be? After practicing Kuju to this level, it is as difficult as ascending to heaven to go further. How can you be sure that he can surpass Xiao Man in such a short time?" Princess Taiping smiled and said, "It's very simple. Because this person is not familiar with Kuju, he has not fully displayed his strength." Shanghai Wan was surprised and said, "Such a wonderful polo skill. You actually said that he does not know Kuju?" Princess Taiping did not answer her question. She slightly frowned and doubtfully said, "Strange, his polo skill is superb, but he does not know how to ride a horse. The ball under his feet seems to be alive, but he does not seem to be very proficient in Kuju. So where did he practice his polo skill? This person is really interesting." The Kuju game was over. The palace maids and female guards scored 7 goals. The monks of White Horse Temple were tired like grandchildren, but they only lost 1 goal and got 6 points. Of course, this was just an ordinary contest, only 1 round of the game. Looking at the appearance of the monks if they played another round, most people would not be able to run at all. In addition, the inner palace team didn't send out all their masters. Princess Taiping and Shangguan Wan didn't participate, so Xiamuin was the number 1 master of the inner palace team. She used the strategy of using a mediocre force against a superior force. She let Gao Ying and Lan Yiqing keep a close eye on Yang Fan while she fought against Chu Kuanga. Out of 7 goals, she scored 5. In this game, Yang Fan met a real master. His skills and Kuju skills became more and more proficient and flexible. In the end, Gao Ying and Lan Yiqing could not stop him at all. Yang Fan scored one goal after another, and the score was close to that of Xie Xiaoman. Although there were not many opportunities for the two to formally confront each other, the whole field actually became a contest between the two of them. In the end, Xiamuwen had no choice but to personally deal with him. Chu Kuanga, Hong 1, Hong 6, and a few others who were good at Kuju scored another goal when the opponent's main force was pinned down by Yang Fan. In the end, they lost by only one goal. The palace maids felt that they did not surpass the White Horse Temple team by a large margin, so they were very dissatisfied. Originally, they still had many first-class Kuja masters who had not entered the field, such as Princess Taiping and Shangguan Daizhao. Otherwise, they believed that they could at least surpass this group of bald donkeys by 10 goals. But the monks of White Horse Temple were also very dissatisfied. They only lost by 1 goal. If Ma Qiao did not lose his mind and took the initiative to give the ball to the pouting little beauty, wouldn't it be a draw? Therefore, as soon as the game ended, the palace maids jumped in joy, and the eunuchs also shouted and cheered at the top of their lungs. All the participating monks and the spectating monks swarmed Ma Qiao and punched and kicked him again. Poor Ma Qiao, in order to atone for his sins, ran around like a donkey. He ran until he was out of breath and did not even have the strength to escape. Fortunately, although these ruffians did not know how to control their strength, they still knew to be merciful to their own people. In addition, they knew that Ma Qiao had a good relationship with the chief monk, so they did not hit him too hard. Yang Fan saw that they did not hit him too hard, so he did not pay attention to them. Ma Qiao was a glutton who could not move when he saw a beautiful woman. Previously, he almost lost his life because of women. Now he still did not repent. He was so muddle-headed during the game. It was time for him to be taught a lesson. Although the game was over, Princess Taiping still stared at Yang Fan. She saw Yang Fan walk leisurely to the side of the field, talking and laughing with the tattooed strong man next to him. He lifted his clothes to wipe the sweat on his forehead. When he smiled, he revealed a mouthful of white teeth. Princess Taiping was in a trance. Suddenly, the figure of another handsome man appeared in her mind, and quietly overlapped with the Yang Fan in front of her. That man at that time was also so young. He wore a set of arrow sleeves that was similar to Yang Fan's martial clothes. He laughed heartily, picked up his clothes to wipe the sweat, and walked in front of the stands with a few friends, talking and laughing. His face was full of sunshine, and his smile was so bright. Compared to many youths who secretly glanced at the emperor and empress on the stage and deliberately made a mighty posture, his steps seemed so calm, so casual. But in the casual, there was a sense of freedom and elegance. At that time, Father Emperor's headache came back, and he was in a dull pain. He held his head and used his index finger to gently rub the space between his eyebrows. Mother Empress was sweeping her eyes over all the noble sons who had just finished their game. That day, Mother Empress specially held a Kuju competition to find a good husband for her. She was still very young, very lively, very straightforward, and very bold. When she saw his smile, the young girl's heart went into a trance, as if the sun in the sky dazzled her eyes. She almost didn't think and reached out her hand, pointing at the youth who leisurely walked in front of the stage. Her heart was beating wildly in her chest like a fawn, and her voice trembled with shyness. But her voice was so loud that when she spoke, she startled herself. "That's him," she cried. "It's him," she cried. "Anyang, daughter wants him to be my son-in-law." This shout, like the morning bell on the gate of heaven, suddenly spread out from the stage, rippling in the top of her heart, making it tremble. A layer of tears floated in Princess Taiping's eyes. She blinked her eyes, blinked away the mist in her eyes, and said in a low voice, "Call that youth for me." Her slender jade finger pointed at Yang Fan, who had just taken a kasaya from someone's hand, and was talking and laughing with others while putting on the kasaya. Shanghai won was slightly surprised and glanced at her. Her eyes glittered, but she didn't say anything. Yang Fan was led to Princess Taiping by a palace maid. Princess Taiping didn't just sit there and wait for him to come. She had already walked out of the screen before Yang Fan and stood at the edge of the competition ground. That kind of hesitant and urgent look was like a young girl meeting her lover for the first time. Shanghai won, or was even more surprised at her forgetfulness. Yang Fan knew that if Princess Taiping saw him, she might have some doubts and even call him in front of her to ask clearly, but he was not worried in his heart. Although Princess Taiping was the princess of the princesses and the most favored woman by the empress in the Tang dynasty, he had never heard that she had any domineering behavior. Moreover, Xue Huai was the most favored man in the Tang dynasty. Based on Xue Huai's character of being protective, if this princess really wanted to find trouble with him, Xue Huai could also help her. Therefore, Yang Fan was very calm in his heart. He walked in front of Princess Taiping, calmly bowed, and respectfully said, "Little monk Hong Shichi greets the princess." After saying that, Yang Fan quickly glanced at Shanghai Wan and deeply engraved her appearance in his heart. Shanghai Wan was looking at him curiously. Being looked at by him, her heart unexpectedly trembled. That kind of look seemed to be just a casual glance. But Shanghai Wan felt completely different. Being looked at by him, Shanghai Wan actually felt like a little white rabbit being stared at by a big bad wolf. It was very dangerous and very scary. She was Shangguan Dai Zhao, the first person under the empress. When had she ever been afraid of anyone? Shanghai Wan thought that it was just a psychological effect, and was a little annoyed that she was a little afraid of a little monk's look. So she straightened her chest and bravely looked back. But Yang Fan had already stopped looking at her, so her counterattack fell on the air. Chapter 116. Hong Shichi. Princess Taiping stared at Yang Fan for a while and said slowly, "I've seen you before, right?" Yang Fan smiled calmly and said, "Yes. I had the honor to meet you by the Luo River." Princess Taiping's eyes flashed and said, "You weren't a monk at that time." Yang Fan touched his bald head and said with a wry smile, "Princess is still a princess, but the shopkeeper has become a monk. The affairs of the world are hard to predict. Back then, I never thought that this day would come." Princess Taiping glanced at his clothes and asked, "What's your position in the White Horse Temple?" Yang Fan put his hands together and said seriously, "I'm the head monk in the White Horse Temple." Princess Taiping raised her eyebrows and said, "I didn't expect you to become a monk quickly and get promoted even faster. Others might not have the chance to become the head monk of a temple even if they read scriptures and hit wooden fish for a lifetime. But you, in the blink of an eye, became the head monk of the largest temple in Luoyang." Yang Fan smiled shyly and said, "Princess, you don't know. It was Master Xue's idea to become a monk and be promoted to the head monk. I think you also know that Master Xue is used to creating miracles, just like the Ming Tang and Heaven in Front." Princess Taiping snorted and pondered over the meaning of Yang Fan's words. She was slightly moved and said, "Could it be, Xue Huai forced you to become a monk?" Her guess was half right, but Yang Fan said seriously, "Princess, you are wrong. When I was a layman, I met with some trouble. Fortunately, I was enlightened by Master Xue and sought shelter from Buddhism. Only then was I able to save my life. I am very grateful to Master Xue." When Yang Fan said this, he suddenly saw Xue Huai walking lightly from the back of the palace. Hong Yi's disciple went up and said something to him. Xue Huai hurried over and was standing behind a group of palace maids, listening to their conversation. Yang Fan saw his movement from the corner of his eye. He pretended not to know, but his words were extremely respectful and loyal. Princess Taiping revealed a faint smile on her face and said, "Is it better to be a monk than an ordinary person? Since you became a monk just to avoid calamity and not because you have a heart for Buddhism, then not to mention being a chief monk. Even if you were to become an abbot, I'm afraid you would be unwilling, right? That day, I had the intention to recruit you, but you refused. Today, there's no harm in me saying it again. If you're willing to become my disciple, I'll help you deal with whatever troubles you have. What do you think? Working in my residence might not be as awe-inspiring as the White Horse Temple's first seat, but at your age, I'm afraid you might not like it. As soon as Xue Huai came out of the back of the palace, Hong Yi and the others rushed to him to show off their bravery and brilliance. They said that if it wasn't for Ma Qiao's lust, with their months of hard work, they would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Tang Dynasty's #1 martial arts team. Xue Huai was overjoyed to hear this. Now, as soon as he arrived at the side of the arena, he heard that Princess Taiping was trying to poach his disciple. Princess Taiping wanted to poach the #1 main force of the White Horse Temple. It was really intolerable. He suppressed his anger and wanted to see how Yang Fan would answer. Yang Fan had already seen him standing at the back of the crowd. This Xue Huai, he was like a donkey. If he angered him, he would not dare to do anything to Princess Taiping. But if he killed him in front of everybody, it would be a piece of cake. Yang Fan looked at his nose, looked at his heart, and replied in all seriousness, "Amit Ba! Your Highness, your words are wrong. I was able to escape from disaster because of Master Xue's kindness. I was also recognized by Master Xue, who put me in an important position. As the saying goes, a scholar will die for his bosom friend. How can I find another master?" Xue Huai was very happy to hear this. Princess Taiping didn't know that he had arrived and was still a little reluctant. In her opinion, recruiting Yang Fan was only because she cherished his talent. This Yang Fan, whether it was Kuju or bow striking, was a promising talent. If he could enter Princess Taiping's residence, it would be of great help to her. She liked sports since she was a child and loved Kuju and bow striking. If it wasn't for this, her parents wouldn't have deliberately held a Kuju competition to choose a husband for her. Later, because her husband Xue Xiao also loved Kuju and bow striking, the couple complemented each other. They even set up a Kuju team and bow striking team in their residence and became super fans. Unfortunately, she was obsessed with Kuju and bow striking. But every year during the Lantern Festival, the palace held a competition. She didn't win either of these two. On the contrary, sumo wrestling, which she didn't like, always won first place. Today, after seeing Yang Fan, Princess Taiping really cherished his talent. Otherwise, with her proud and arrogant personality, why would she condescend to recruit him again and again? Of course, she saw that Yang Fan looked like her deceased husband. Maybe it was because of empathy, but she didn't realize this subconscious effect. After hearing Yang Fan's words, Princess Taiping sneered and said mockingly, "Look at you. Do you really want to be a monk for the rest of your life? I don't know if you have any brothers in your family. If not, when you become a monk, your family line will end. Is it because repaying a favor that you are unfilial? If you are really devoted to Buddhism." The corner of Princess Taiping's mouth curled up slightly. She said mockingly, "I don't believe it at all. Don't think that after entering my residence, you will only be a Kuju player for the rest of your life. If you really have the ability, I will recommend you to be an official. There are also a lot of people who have been recommended by me to be an official." Although Princess Taiping was the most beloved daughter of Wu Zetian, she rarely involved herself in political affairs. Until the end of Empress Wu's reign, she was very clever. She never appeared to be interested in politics in front of her mother. In fact, until Xue Xiao's death, she was a little woman immersed in love and happiness. She never thought of participating in political affairs. However, not participating in political affairs did not mean that she was completely isolated. Princess Taiping's pair of discerning eyes completely inherited her mother's characteristics. She was very knowledgeable and had recommended many talented people to the imperial court. After these people were put in an important position by the imperial court, they indeed showed their extraordinary talents. Afterwards, because she was interested in politics, she recommended more and more talented people. Because of this, there were some scandals. The rumors in the streets said that the people she recommended were all her gigolos, just like how Shanghai Wanner presided over the Zhao and Guan and evaluated the world's poetry. Many of the world's poets gathered under her. As a result, there were many different opinions among the people, saying that many of these people were her gigolos. Working as a woman, the more men she came into contact with, all kinds of unbearable rumors naturally came one after another. This kind of atmosphere was still the same in modern times. As long as a young and beautiful woman was put in an important position or became a secretary, even if you were innocent, you would still be looked at with colored glasses. At this time, Xue Huaiyi's thoughts went astray. In his view, this coquettish young widow most likely took a fancy to Yang Fan's handsomeness. This princess was incomparably beautiful. Even he often had thoughts of her. At this time, he was afraid that Yang Fan would not be able to resist the temptation of Princess Taiping's beauty. Once he agreed, even if he did not nod his head, Princess Taiping might not have the ability to snatch him away from his hands. As a result, Xue Huai let out a long laugh, walked out from the crowd, and loudly said, "Everyone in the world knows that the princess loves talents. The talents recommended by the princess are all put in an important position by the imperial court. This is not false. However, I already have the heart to plan for 17's future. There is no need to trouble your highness with this matter." Princess Taiping did not expect Xue Huai to arrive at this time and could not help but be surprised. She was startled for a moment, then smiled and said, "Teacher, Xue is here. Although the head of your temple is skilled, it is a pity that your other disciples are not promising talents. With just him alone, it will be difficult for teacher Xue to show his skills during the Lantern Festival. In my residence, there are many experts in Kuju and Koju. If I can get your disciples' help, I may not be unable to take first place." Xue Huai sneered and said, "This, your highness does not need to worry about. My White Horse Temple did not have the fate to participate in the Lantern Festival in the past. If I can rank in the top 3 this time, I will be satisfied. Speaking of which, I and your highness are rivals. How is it possible for me to give away my Kuju expert?" Princess Taiping smiled lightly and said, "Since teacher Xue cherishes talent so much, it is not appropriate for me to take away your beloved disciple. Wanner, let's go." Princess Taiping finished speaking, flicked her sleeves, and left. Xue Huai was seething with anger as he loudly said, "Princess was wrong just now. Not only do I want to fight for the title of Kuju and Jiju, I also want to fight for the title of sumo wrestling, which has always been dominated by your Taiping princess residence. This is a one-on-one competition. I will rely on my disciple Hong Shiqi." Princess Taiping paused and slowly turned around. The sullen expression on her face had disappeared and was replaced with a faint smile. She said, "I did not know that this disciple of teacher Xue is an all-rounder. Good. Very good. Then during the Lantern Festival, I want to see teacher Xue's skills." Princess Taiping raised her eyebrows and reached out to hold Wan Er's arm. She said in a deep voice, "At that time I will also participate with Wan. I want to see the real martial arts of your disciple." Xue Huai laughed and said, "Wonderful. I want you to participate. If not, how can I show the prestige of my White Horse Temple?" Princess Taiping heard Xue Huai's presumptuous words and was extremely angry. But she really did not dare to contradict Xue Huai. Even though she was the most favored princess, she was still quite afraid of Xue Huai. The royal family did not have family ties. It was not only because of the power struggle and deception. Even in the era of Qingping, where the position of crown prince was determined at birth, the relationship between the imperial sons and daughters was very cold, and the relationship between them and their parents was the same. Why? Because the environment they grew up in was different. Whether a family was close or not, it was not based on blood. Kinship and friendship were the same. They were both nurtured together. In the royal family, whether it was brothers, sisters, father and son, mother and daughter, they did not spend much time together. The royal children had their own palace, and each had a group of eunuchs and nannies to take care of them. Brothers and sisters did not have many opportunities to spend time with each other. Even when they greeted their father and mother, they only greeted them out of courtesy. Naturally, the family ties between them were very indifferent. Princess Taiping could not guarantee that she, as a biological daughter, was more important in her mother's heart than Feng Xiaobao, who was her mother's favorite. This brat does not know how to appreciate favors. He made me be humiliated in front of everyone. For a moment, Princess Taiping hated Yang Fan. Chapter 117. Xue Huai saw Princess Taiping and Shanghai on her leave and snorted heavily. He turned to look at Yang Fan and smiled. He had heard everything Yang Fan had said. Xue Huai was a common man in the marketplace and was very particular about loyalty. Yang Fan's loyal reply was especially to his taste. Xue Huai patted Yang Fan's shoulder and said loudly, "Don't listen to that foxy woman's coaxing. You just need to do your job well. In the future, I will give you a great future." There were many palace maids and eunuchs present. Xue Huai openly accused Princess Taiping of being a foxy woman. He was not afraid that his words would reach Princess Taiping's ears. In fact, in Xue Huai's heart, Princess Taiping was indeed a foxy woman. Every time he saw her, he could not help but feel restless. If this kind of monster was not a foxy woman, then what was she? After Princess Taiping and Shanghai Wan left, they could not continue the competition. With the current physical condition of the monks of White Horse Temple, they could not continue the competition even if they wanted to. All the monks put on their robes and prepared to leave the palace. As Xue Huai led the group of monks out, he asked about the situation of the competition just now. Although Yang Fan was also annoyed that Ma Qiao had failed to live up to his expectations, if he allowed these monks to add oil to the fire and infuriate Xue Huai, Ma Qiao would inevitably suffer again. Yang Fan hurriedly came over and said a few words before changing the topic. He grinned and said, "Abbot, if we can show our faces in the Upper Prime tournament, what is the abbot prepared to reward the disciples?" This sentence was also what all the disciples wanted to know. Those who originally wanted to report Ma Qiao immediately shut their mouths and pricked up their ears to listen to Xue Huai. Xue Huai waved his hand and said, "If you can fight for the prestige of our White Horse Temple, each of you will be rewarded with 100,000 coins." All the monks heard this and immediately cheered. Xue Huai glanced at Yang Fan and said, "As for you, White Horse Temple is qualified to enter the palace and compete because of you. I've said before that I'll give you a great future. What do you want?" Yang Fan said, "This disciple wants to join the army like 19th junior brother." Xue Huai was slightly startled. He was not lying when he said that he wanted to give Yang Fan a bright future. However, his original idea was to arrange for Yang Fan to be the master of a temple under the jurisdiction of the White Horse Temple. Or he could turn him into a layman disciple of the White Horse Temple. Then he could use his great general title to request for him to be a nominal general. All in all, he did not want Yang Fan to leave his side. The Lantern Festival was held every year. After next year, there would be another one. Once Yang Fan left, where could he find another outstanding person to lead the White Horse Temple in the competition? Xue Huai was a little displeased. "What, 17? Do you really want to leave me?" Yang Fan quickly moved closer and whispered, "Abbot, if it weren't for you, this disciple in 18 would have fled to the ends of the earth. How could this disciple forget your kindness? If you say that this disciple is only interested in profit, I should also understand that I can only rely on you to enjoy the shade. Don't you think so?" Xue Huai's expression softened a little. "Then why did you?" Yang Fan revealed a slightly bitter expression. "Abbot, this disciple just doesn't want to be a monk. In fact, no matter where I go, won't I still be your disciple? Moreover, if I enter the imperial army and make a name for myself, it won't do you any harm. Think about it. You have the Empress's trust. Although no one dares to disobey you, you can't always trouble the Empress for everything, right? If Abbot has his own strength in all aspects, especially in the army, then Abbot, you are like a big tree with deep roots. No matter how the wind blows in all directions, no matter how hard it blows, Abbot will not be shaken in the slightest. The Empress is old after all. Xue Huai was enlightened. He slowly nodded and said, yes, that makes sense. Good. Since you have this intention, I will send you and Yashuang to the imperial army after this year's upper prime. Yang Fan hurriedly thanked him. Thank you, Abbot. When Yang Fan learned that Chu Tiange's biggest wish was to return to the imperial army, and this request was also agreed by Xue Huai, he had the idea of joining the imperial army. However, he never found a chance to ask. Now that Xue Huai and Princess Taiping had separated, it unexpectedly helped him. Thinking back to the time when he had infiltrated the White Horse Temple while being hunted by the entire city, he had originally wanted to resolve the situation in front of him. He had not expected that through Xue Huai, not only would he be able to see the great Tang's hidden prime, Minister Shengguanwan, in the imperial palace, but he would also have a chance to get close to Qiushenji. This monk, Xue, was really his lucky star. Although the White Horse Temple disciples were only defeated by one goal in a contest with the imperial Kuja master, they were very excited for a while. But after this battle, they still saw their shortcomings, even if they didn't admit it. Since then, they trained even harder. Originally, Yang Fan was worried that these ruffians couldn't bear hardships, but he didn't expect that once their fighting spirit was aroused, they would be able to bear hardships far better than ordinary people. It should be known that these ruffians became ruffians because their families were poor and they had no food or clothing to rely on. They had also suffered a lot in the past. Although they had become ruffians now, they still had the strength to bear hardships, but it was covered by their slippery appearance. Now that they had the fighting spirit and Xue Huai's reward, how could they not go all out? After 2 days, they went to the palace again and competed with the Imperial Kuju team again. After coming back, they continued to work hard to improve their skills. Yang Fan was the main force of the team every time. He had fought with Xia Xiaoman from the Imperial Kuju team more than once. Both of them had a deep impression of each other. Every time they met, they would fight like roosters, wanting to suppress each other. Qiushenji had already sent a message that the Kuja masters selected from the Imperial Guards would be assembled tomorrow. At that time, they would rush over and compete with the White Horse Temple disciples. So today, Yang Fan didn't give them too many training tasks. He simply moved their bodies so as not to consume too much of their physical strength. Ma Qiao had been sitting on the bench these days. Of course, he didn't participate in the competition. In all the daily activities of the White Horse Temple, he was naturally excluded. Imagine if you were in a group, but everyone treated you like air. No one would sit with you when you were eating. What would it feel like? It wasn't easy to integrate into a circle, but it was easy to be excluded and isolated by a circle. One mistake was enough to get you beaten up by everyone, from a small family and a workshop to a large city and a country. It was the same. Ma Qiao sat alone under the shade of the locust tree. His chin rested on his knees. He looked at his companions on the court with a lonely face. That's it. Brother Chu, you should go back and rest. Tomorrow, it doesn't matter if we win or lose the game against the Imperial Guards. The key is to familiarize yourself with their playing style and learn their strengths. Only by competing with such a strong team can we improve ourselves. Well, okay. You should also rest early. Don't practice horsemanship tonight. Chu Kuanga wanted to say something, but stopped. In the end, he just nodded and said what Yang Fan wanted him to say. He then turned around and walked to the meditation room. Chu Kuanga was naturally confident in his riding skills. After this period of hard training, Yang Fan's horsemanship had also improved by leaps and bounds. coupled with his superb horsemanship skills. It was enough to make up for his inferior horsemanship compared to the top experts. Chu Kuanga believed that if there were 2 or 3 experts like him and Yang Fan in their team, they would be able to compete with the Imperial Guards. However, such experts could only be found by chance. It was very difficult to win the intense polo game with just the 2 of them as the main force. Chu Kuanga was not confident in this. Moreover, this matter was related to whether he could return to the Imperial Guards, so he was under great psychological pressure. However, even if he told Yang Fan about this, Yang Fan could do nothing about it. It would only add to his worries, so it was better not to say it. In fact, Yang Fan was also aware of Chu Kuanga's psychological pressure. To Xue Huai, this game was just a matter of face. To the ruffians, it was just 100,000 yuan of wealth. To him and Chu Tinga, it was actually of great significance. However, he also felt that there was no need to say this out loud. Therefore, he only silently looked at Chu Kuanga's heavy footsteps and did not say anything. Seeing that Yang Fan was idle, Ma Chiao unconsciously straightened his body, as if he was afraid that Yang Fan would not see him, due to the cold shoulder from everyone these days. He had been so embarrassed that he was depressed and did not dare to speak. He was even a little afraid to come into contact with Yang Fan. However, among everyone, he was the most friendly with Yang Fan. At this time, he was even more eager to get close to Yang Fan. "Brother Chiao, come with me." As expected, Yang Fan walked over, but he only said one sentence before walking towards the backyard. Ma Chiao hurriedly got up, patted the dust off his butt, and followed behind him. In the late autumn dusk, the pagoda forest was very quiet. 1st level pagoda, 3rd level pagoda, 5th level pagoda, and 7th level pagoda, from 1 to 7, they were built for the dead monks according to their status. It was as if pagoda after pagoda stood there quietly, forming a quiet forest of pagodas. Yang Fan walked slowly through the pagoda forest. After walking for a while, he sat down on a 7-story pagoda pedestal covered in moss. He turned his head to look at Ma Chiao and patted the stone pedestal beside him. Ma Chiao understood and walked over, carefully sitting down next to him. Yang Fan raised his face and looked at the dusky sky. After a while, he suddenly asked, "Brother Chiao, what do you think people live for?" Ma Chiao was perturbed and did not know what topic to use to break this cold situation. Suddenly hearing him say this, he could not help but laugh. "No way, Xiao Fan, you have only been a monk for a few days, and you are already learning from those old monks. Don't tell me you still want to be a real monk?" Yang Fan stared at him seriously and said word by word, "This is not a trick. I just want to know, what do you live for?" Ma Chiao was at a loss. After thinking carefully for a while, he mumbled, "Live? My parents gave birth to me. Of course I have to live. If I live, then live well, be filial to my parents, marry a wife and have children, continue the family line. It should be like this. Otherwise, what else do you think I live for?" Chapter 118. Yang Fan calmly sat there. After a long time, he slowly said, "When I was a child, I lived in a small mountain village, carefree and without worries. I never thought about how big the world outside the mountain village was. Had it not been for the murder which followed, I think I should have grown up in peace there, married a mountain girl, and might have had children of my own by now. Many years later, my descendants would bury me in a graveyard among the weeds on the hillside facing the sun. Every year on the Qingming festival, they would come to my grave and put a few fresh fruits on it. On the Chongyang festival, they would come to my grave and burn a stack of paper money for me. From birth to death, I would stay there. Other than Shaozhou, I would never go to any other place, and I would never get to know other people. Perhaps this kind of life would be very boring in other people's eyes. But people live, sooner or later they will die, sooner or later they will turn into the earth. It doesn't matter if you are an emperor, a general, or a commoner, it's all the same. Whether the grave is magnificent or not, it's other people who see it. What does it have to do with you? The tranquility of a small village is not necessarily a kind of happiness." Ma Chiao didn't know why he suddenly said these things. He looked at him with a puzzled expression. Yang Fan continued, "But the heavens don't follow my wishes. My village was destroyed, my relatives all died. I had no choice but to leave and look for a new life. At the same time, I have to bear the injustice of my relatives, the debt of my relatives. But this is only my responsibility, it's not the whole of my future life. When I finish all this, I will have to find my own path and start my own life. Do you know what I plan to do?" Ma Qiao couldn't help but ask, "What do you plan to do?" Yang Fan smiled and said, "I plan to, after I clear my debt, I will first find my Nuno." Ma Qiao said, "In terms of age, she has already grown up. She is working as a maid in some rich and powerful family. In another 2 years, maybe she will be betrothed to some steward or a capable servant. The sea of people is boundless. Where will you find her? She saved you, but you saved her as well. You don't have to take so much responsibility for yourself." Yang Fan said seriously, "I don't know if she's my responsibility, but she is my concern." Worries? Yes, worry. Although we are not related by blood, we're closer than biological siblings. If I can't find her and confirm whether she's alive or not, I won't be at ease, so I have to find her. If she's already married and her man treats her well, I can leave without worry and live my own life. If she hasn't married yet and her master doesn't treat her well, if she's willing to come with me, then I'll take her away and treat her as my own sister. I'll be responsible for finding her a satisfactory husband, preparing her dowry, and marrying her off in style. What about you? What are your plans?" "Maybe I'll go back to Nanyang. My master is now the ruler of a country, and my senior is the young master. I can live well there. Of course, if I meet a girl and fall in love with her, and she likes to live in the Tang dynasty, I'll also stay with her. No matter where, as long as I have land and a house, I have my own things to do, and I can let my wife and children live a stable life. It's very simple, isn't it?" Yang Fan looked at Ma Qiao with a smile and said, "Every man has to marry and have children when he grows up. He has to have his own family and produce his own descendants. Nobles, gentry, merchants, peddlers, all of them are born as humans, born as adults, married and had children, and turned to dust. The same path, there's no difference. Even if you have the whole world, the path you've taken is no different from living in a small mountain village, like I said. The whole world is just a slightly bigger village. However, if you have the chance to become a nobleman, then there's no harm in fighting for it. Because this way, your hut will be more spacious, your courtyard will be bigger, and your fence will be stronger. You can sleep more soundly at night, and you won't have to worry about weasels sneaking into your fence to steal chickens." Yang Fan smiled and said, "If you don't have the ability to become a nobleman, then take a step back and become a nobleman, a gentry, or a merchant. In short, no matter how much ability you have to fight for what you can get with your ability, because this way your parents, wife, and children will live a better life." Yang Fan turned to Ma Qiao and sat face to face with him. He asked seriously, "I'm 17 this year and you're 19. You're 2 years older than me. It's time for you to be crowned. Have you ever thought about how you'll look after your mother in the future? How you'll marry a wife and have children? What kind of mountain village do you plan to give them? What kind of fenced courtyard?" Ma Qiao was stunned. Yang Fan stared at him and asked again, "You've never thought about these things, right?" Ma Qiao's face was a bit red, and he was speechless. Yang Fan said, "Auntie worked hard to do business, to save money for you to marry a wife. Even though she didn't know how to do things and lost money every time she did business, she at least knew what she wanted to do and why she wanted to do it. But what about you? Everyone praised you for being filial. You are filial. But have you ever thought about how you and your family will live a year from now? How you and your family will live 10 years from now? Have you ever thought about how your mother is already old? If she suddenly falls seriously ill with a few copper coins in your pocket, how are you going to find a doctor to treat her? Have you ever thought about how you're going to arrange your life in the future?" Ma Qiao's face was red to the ears, and he already felt a bit ashamed to show his face. Yang Fan was not polite at all and said in a mocking tone, "You haven't. You're just living in a muddle. Every day you open your eyes, fill your stomach, and muddle-headedly deal with the errands in the workshop, and then you've muddled through the day. When you get home at night, you fill your stomach again, and then you sleep soundly. You've probably only considered what's going to happen 3 days from now, right?" Ma Chiao's face was red to the ears. Yang Fan said. "About the matter between you and Bao Yining, let's not talk about right or wrong for the time being. Later on, you bravely stepped forward and didn't let the innocent die for you. Not only did others praise you for being loyal and responsible, but you must also be very proud of yourself and think that you're a hero, right? I'm not going to criticize you about this matter. Even the smartest person can be muddled at times. But about the matter of football, what do you think?" Back then, Chu Kuanga was kicked out of the Imperial Army. Returning to the Imperial Army was his biggest dream, and it was related to his life's fate. "You tell me, is this just a matter of playing football? And for you, isn't this also an opportunity?" Brother Chu wanted to use this matter to make a contribution and have the abbot help him return to the Imperial Army. "Why didn't you think of it? Are you planning to go back to being a workshop attendant after things have calmed down? Or are you planning to be a monk for the rest of your life? I think you've never thought about how you're going to live in the future. You still have an old mother at home waiting for you to take care of, and you still have dozens of years to live. Such a good opportunity is right in front of you. Yet you're still muddle-headed and don't even think about it." Ma Chiao was scolded until his whole body heated up and he was drenched in sweat. Yang Fan said, "I asked you just now, what is the point of living? There's no meaning to a person's life in itself. There's no difference between a pig, a dog, or a mosquito. What's important is what you give it, what you fight for it. This is the root of the spirit of all living things. It doesn't matter if you throw a goal to others. What I want to know is, when will you be able to find your own destiny?" The sound of Yang Fan's footsteps became more and more distant, gradually disappearing into the pagoda forest. Ma Chiao sat there alone for a long time, not moving at all. The sky gradually darkened, but Ma Chiao was still sitting there, the same color as the stone pagoda that had stood for thousands of years. The next morning, when Yang Fan led a group of players to the court, he saw Ma Chiao seriously cleaning the court. The spacious court was almost completely cleaned, and no one knew when he woke up. The monks were very surprised, but they did not say anything. Yang Fan also did not say anything. Of course, he hoped to scold Ma Chiao to wake up. However, the same words may have the effect of a severe warning to some people, but to others it was just a 3-day enthusiasm. Whether Ma Chiao would really repent or not, they would have to wait and see. Today, they still had to wait for the Imperial Guard's archery team to arrive, so they still did not do any intense exercise, mainly to warm up their bodies. A group of monks was practicing archery when suddenly the side door of the temple's backyard opened. Dozens of horses galloped in, and the monks who were practicing immediately stopped and looked at the group of people. The older ones were in their 30s, and the younger ones were not even 20. They were dressed in all kinds of short, archery sleeves and rode tall horses of the same color. Although they were young, fat, thin, tall, and short, and the colors of their clothes and horses were different, their movements and mannerisms revealed a kind of dignified and solemn aura. If only one of them appeared on a horse, perhaps people would not be able to guess their identity. But with so many of them appearing at the same time, and their spirits were all the same, Yang Fan immediately understood that these people were the Imperial Guard's archery team that they had been looking forward to for a long time. Chu Kuanga reined in his horse and looked at the group of people. His body suddenly trembled, and he was a little absent-minded. Among those people, there were actually 2 faces that he was familiar with. Those people looked around disdainfully at the group of monks. Their expressions were originally quite disdainful, but they soon noticed Chu Kuanga. Chu Kuanga was tall, and among the group of monks, he was like a crane among a flock of chickens. It was difficult not to notice him. At a glance, 2 of those people were startled. The two of them looked at each other and whispered a few words, as if they wanted to confirm Chu Kuanga's identity. Then they both knocked on their horses' bellies and welcomed him. The two of them rode to Chu Kuanga's side and looked him up and down. One of them said with some surprise, "Sir, is your surname Chu?" Chu Kuanga's face was a little red from excitement, and there were already faint tears in his eyes. Hearing the two of them ask, he could not help but laugh. "Li Dao Wei San, we haven't seen each other for a few years. Don't you recognize me, Chu Kuanga?" Chapter 119. Big Brother, it really is Big Brother Chu. The two burly men were surprised and overjoyed. They jumped off their horses, lifted their robes, and knelt in front of Chu Kuanga's horse. One of them, whose face was full of beard, burst into tears. "Big Brother, little brother has finally found you. What are you doing? Quickly get up." Chu Kuanga jumped off the horse and hurriedly went forward to support him. The two men, one on the left and one on the right, hugged him tightly. The bearded man hurriedly asked, "Big Brother, where have you been these past few years? I've been looking for you everywhere. I missed you so much." The other man also had tears in his eyes as he choked with sobs. "Big Brother Chu, you made me miss you so much." The three of them hugged each other, revealing their true feelings. This attracted a lot of surprised gazes, but no one came forward to ask. Yang Fan also didn't pay attention to this reunion scene. He was looking at a middle-aged man who was surrounded by a group of people. This person was also wearing a set of arrow sleeves. He was already over 100 years old, and his hair was slightly gray. His stature wasn't tall, but he was extremely sturdy. As he sat on the horse, he was as steady as a mountain. His eyebrows were thick and messy, growing like weeds. One look and one could tell that he was giving off a chilling, killing intent. Yang Fan recognized him. He was Qiu Shinji. That night, although Yang Fan only took a glance at him before running away, the appearance of this great enemy had already been deeply imprinted in Yang Fan's mind. Yang Fan didn't expect that he would personally come with a team. Yang Fan's eyes faintly revealed a murderous intent. But when his eyes moved away from Qiu Shinji's ferocious eyebrows and fell on the saber at Qiu Shinji's waist, the murderous intent faded a little. He then noticed that the people around Qiu Shinji were all tall and sturdy, full of vigor. He was afraid that they were not ordinary people, so he became even more vigilant. Qiu Shinji seemed to have sensed that someone was looking at him. His eyes suddenly shot over like lightning and accurately fixed on Yang Fan. Yang Fan's heart shivered. He instantly withdrew his scrutinizing and hateful eyes and replaced them with curiosity and respect. Seeing Qiu Shinji looking at him, Yang Fan shyly smiled at him and dismounted from his horse. He walked in front of Chu Kuanga and said with a smile, "Big Brother Chu, are these two brothers your old acquaintances?" Chu Kuanga was chatting with the two of them, looking extremely intimate. When he saw Yang Fan walking over, he quickly pulled him in front of him and introduced him to the two of them. Come, let me introduce you. This is the head of the White Horse Temple, Hong Shichi." Yang Fan forced a smile and said, "Brother Chu, you're making fun of me again." Chu Kuanga laughed and said, "This is my little brother Yang Fan. You can call him Beta Persei. Erlang, this is my good friend and brother in the army. You can call him Third Brother Wei." Seeing that Chu Kuanga was very intimate with Yang Fan, Wei Yong hurriedly cupped his hands and said to him, "I am Wei Yong, the commander of the Left Yulin Guards." The Left and Right Yulin Guards of the Tang Dynasty was the head of the Northern Imperial Army. At that time, the Imperial Army guarding the capital and the palace was divided into the Southern Imperial Army and the Northern Imperial Army. The Northern Imperial Army was directly controlled and mobilized by the Emperor. Now it was under the direct control of the Empress, while the Southern Imperial Army was under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of War. In terms of nature, the Northern Imperial Army was the Emperor's private army, while the Southern Imperial Army was the national army. Therefore, the Northern Imperial Army was closer to the Emperor. Yang Fan did not expect that there would be a middle-level officer of the Northern Imperial Army among the anti-Jew members sent by the Imperial Army. Looking at this man's thin cheeks, high cheekbones, towering eyebrows and eyes, he looked a little primitive with a light beard under his chin, full of heroic spirit, and his eyes were like lightning. Yang Fan hurriedly returned a salute to him and said affectionately, "I am Yang Fan. Nice to meet you. Third Brother Wei." Chu Kuanga then pulled the man with a slightly high forehead, a full beard, and a face squeezed in the beard, like a big baboon that had not fully evolved, and introduced him to Yang Fan. "This is Li Dayan, also my good brother. You can call him Brother Li." Yang Fan cupped his hands to the man and said with a smile, "Brother Li!" I dare not. In front of Brother Chu, I dare not call you brother. I am just a few years older than you. You can call me Second Brother Li." Li Dayan hurriedly returned the salute and said to Chu Kuanga with a face full of shame, "It was all because of me that you were harmed. In the past few years, I couldn't find your whereabouts everywhere, and my heart is really—" Chu Kuanga waved his hand and said, "Don't mention those old sesame seeds and grains. Are you still addicted to alcohol all these years?" Li Dayan said solemnly, "Since I caused you to be demoted from the army, I have never touched a drop of alcohol." Chu Kuanga said happily, "Good. If you can repent, you are still my good brother." While the two were talking, Xue Huai had already received the report from the reception monk. He strode out of the meditation room and laughed loudly. "Old Chiu, you are finally here." Chiu Shinji saw Xue Huai and was also full of smiles. He hurriedly dismounted and threw the horsewhip to a guard. He strode forward and cupped his fists. "Master Xue, long time no see." When Master Xue went to the north to attack the Turks, Gugulu fled at the sight of the wind and did not dare to fight. It really showed the power of the Tang dynasty. It is a pity that I cannot celebrate with you due to military duties. I hope you do not blame me. Xue Huai smiled. "It's fine. I hate those boring social engagements the most. It is good that you are here today. You can drink with me. Come. Please come in." Chiu Shinji turned around and ordered the others, "Dismount and rest for a while." Everyone dismounted, and the reception monk led them into the meditation room. Li Dayan and Wei Yong were still chatting with Chu Kuanga. Yang Fan used the corner of his eyes to look at Li Dayan's movements until they left. Only then did he turn his attention back to Chu Kuanga and the others. Li Dayan was laughing and crying with Chu Kuanga. From his narration, Yang Fan gradually understood the reason why Chu Kuanga was kicked out of the Imperial Army. It turned out that promotions in the army were also based on seniority. It was much easier for the descendants of the old and meritorious officials to be promoted than ordinary people. A soldier without any background would have to put in 100 times more effort and achieve 100 times more meritorious service than those with status and background. Chu Kuanga and Li Dali were born as commoners. With their martial arts skills, they fought bravely and achieved many meritorious services. That was how they were promoted step by step and gradually became mid-level officers in the Imperial Army. Because they had the same background, they appreciated each other and became very close friends. Li Dayan had a bad habit of drinking as much as his life. Once, when they were on duty in the palace, although Li Dayan did not drink at night, he had a hangover at noon. The effects of the alcohol had not dissipated, and his body still reeked of alcohol. In the end, he was discovered by the patrolling general. This matter should be punished, but it was not a big crime. However, the general wanted to place his trusted aide in the army, but Li Dayan had outstanding meritorious service, and his trusted aide could not be put on the stage, so he had no excuse. Because of this, he made a big fuss over a small matter, so he was dismissed and a series of punishments came. Originally, the matter should have ended here. After all, it was Li Dayan who was at fault first. Although Chu Kuanga regretted that his brother had lost his future because of his addiction to alcohol, it was not good for him to speak up for him. However, After the general's trusted aide took over Li Dayan's position, he saw Li Dayan as a thorn in his side and targeted him at all times, suppressing him. The rules in the army were much stricter than those in the local areas, and the rules were also much stricter. There were many ways to humiliate and oppress someone. Li Dayan was humiliated in every way possible, but he had to swallow his anger. However, Chu Kuanga endured it again and again. He could not stand it any longer and stood up for his brother. He first quarreled with the officer, and then they started fighting. It was also because the kid could not take the beating, and Chu Kuanga was so angry that he used more force. That person was actually crippled by Chu Kuanga's punches and kicks. This time, the matter was blown out of proportion. Although it was not uncommon for private fights to happen in the army, the situation was serious when it was blown out of proportion. Fortunately, Chu Kuanga had saved the life of his immediate superior on the battlefield back then. At this time, he stood up for justice and mediated on his behalf, forcefully suppressing the matter. In the end, Chu Kuanga was spared the punishment of being exiled, but he was still whipped 300 times and chased out of the barracks. Li Dayan was ashamed and ashamed. All these years, whenever he had time, he would search everywhere. However, he really did not expect Chu Kuanga to be hiding in the streets, so he could not find out his whereabouts at all. Today, when he saw Chu Kuanga again, Li Dayan was both happy and guilty. He could not help but cry when he talked about his sadness. Chu Kuanga, Wei Yong, and Yang Fan had to comfort him instead. Li Dayan pulled Chu Kuanga and was asking him about his experiences in the past few years. Qiu Xinji and Xue Huai walked out side by side, followed by the bow-striking experts. Qiu Xinji stood firmly, and his sharp eyes swept across the monks on the bow-striking field. He smiled and said, "Master Xue, it is not that I am boasting, but every year my bow-striking team loses to the Tubo people, but this second place is still firmly in our hands. Master Xue is a person with great ability, but in the way of bow striking, your disciples may not be as good as the military elites like me." Qiu Xinji's cold eyes swept across, and he pointed at Chu Kuanga and said, "Perhaps only this burly man can compete with my subordinates. As for the others, Qiu Xinji laughed and shook his head. Xue Huai's chest was open, and he really had the appearance of an unrestrained monk. After hearing Qiu Xinji's words, he laughed and said, "Old Qiu, if you really have good eyesight, then no matter what you say, I have nothing to say. Unfortunately, you have misjudged this time. In my class of disciples, the strongest is not 19 but 17. Xue Huai proudly called out, "17, come forward and greet General Qiu." Yang Fan hurriedly went forward and bowed with his palms together and said, "Little Monk Hong 17 greets General Qiu." Qiu Xinji's curly beard was like a halberd, and it made his not-too-tall body look incomparably majestic. His tiger-like eyes shone brightly, and he carefully looked up and down at Yang Fan and said in surprise, "Master Xue, this is your #1 expert." Xue Huai puffed out his chest and said proudly, "That's right. This is my 17th disciple, and he is now the head of the temple. Hee. Old Qiu, you can't judge a book by its cover. Don't look down on him. This disciple of mine has reached the acme of perfection in the art of bow striking." When Princess Taiping saw him, she also tried every means possible to recruit him. Chapter 120. Oh! Qiu Xinji was moved and said, "Princess Taiping's eyes are very good. It seems that this boy has some ability to make the princess think so highly of him. However, Kuju and bow striking are different after all. Your disciple is good at Kuju, but he may not be a bow striking master." Unconvinced, Xue Huai said, "I have requested an edict from the Empress to invite you, the archery masters of the Imperial Army, here. I want to let you experience it." Qiu Xinji smiled and said, "Okay, then let's have a match." Qiu Xinji waved his hand, and the high-spirited warriors behind him strode forward. Li Dayan and Wei Yong, who were still reluctant to part with Chu Kuanga, also said their goodbyes and ran into the formation. Chioshinji said proudly, "These 10 people are the bow-striking masters that I have carefully selected from the 16 guards of the North and South offices. This year, they will go to the palace to participate in the competition. Master Shui, I will not be lenient when we fight." Shui Huai was a naturally optimistic person. He did not care about his strength and always felt that he had the ability to compete with such a strong team. So he said, "That's what I want you to do. 17, 19, you guys get ready too." Yang Fan, Chu Kuanga, Hong 1, Hong 6, and other White Horse temple monks who were good at bow striking also stood up and faced the 10 people. The officers on the other side looked at the group of bald monks with disdain on their faces. However, they couldn't show it because of Shui Huai. Chioshinji said, "You guys get ready and fight first. Let me see how good Master Shui is at bow striking." His eyes fell on Chu Kuanga, and he said hesitantly, I seem to have seen you before?" Chu Kuanga stepped forward. He was wearing a monk's robe, but he gave a military salute and said respectfully, "Great General, I am Chu Kuanga. I used to be the right guard cavalry officer." "Ah." Chioshinji's eyes brightened, and he said, "Chu Kuanga, not bad. I remember you. You were the best bow-striking master in our army." "Then how did you?" Chu Kuanga said sadly, "I offended my superior and was kicked out of the imperial army." Chioshinji shook his head. "See, what a pity." His eyes suddenly brightened as he said, "At that time I was the provincial governor of Dai province and was beyond my reach. Now that I have returned to the capital, are you willing to return to the imperial army? This general can still make this decision." Before Chu Kuanga could say anything, Shui Huai had already laughed out loud and said, "Old Chiu, I didn't expect you to learn from Taiping and come to steal my family's corner." "Haha, I was just about to ask you to recall 19 back to the Imperial Army. However, I can't do it now. He is still a member of the White Horse Temple. No matter what, we can talk about it after the Shangyuan Ju competition." Chioshinji smiled and said, "It's best if Teacher Shui is willing to let him go. All right, leave this matter to me." Shui Huai chuckled and said, "I originally wanted to entrust this matter to you, so you won't be able to shirk it even if you want to. It's not just him. I have a few other disciples who can't focus on worshipping Buddha and want to join the army to be warriors. When the time comes, I'll also entrust this matter to you. We'll discuss this matter in detail later. Quickly let them compete. I want to see how their skills are after these days of hard training." The members of the 2 teams immediately made their preparations. They tightened their leggings, tied their headscarves, fastened their belts, and arranged their saddles. As Chu Kuanga tied his leggings, he said to Yang Fan in a low voice, "I have left the army for a few years, so I don't know how strong the Ju masters in the army are now. However, Li Da and Wei San are among them, so they shouldn't be weak. Among us, the only ones who can really fight with them are you and me. When we fight later, we can't be greedy and seek victory. We have to let the others fight with them. It doesn't matter if we lose this time. We can find their weaknesses and continue training." Yang Fan nodded and said, "I also think so. Don't worry if we really want to win. I'm afraid we will lose miserably. Keep your cool and see how capable they are before making any further plans." Okay. Yang Fan tidied up his clothes and was about to turn around to tie his ponytail when he saw someone walk over and swiftly tie up his ponytail. Seeing that Yang Fan was looking at him, he opened his mouth and smiled at Yang Fan. The person who had come was Ma Chiao. Compared to his usual self, he didn't seem to have changed at all, but Yang Fan could see something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. There was a bit of seriousness, a bit of perseverance, and a bit of clarity. Perhaps, after yesterday's words, he had really thought through something. Yang Fan said, "Your riding skills are not good, so you can't compete today." "I know." Ma Chiao smiled and said, "I'm not made for this, so it's useless to train. I've thought about it. After the Shangyuan Ju competition, I will join the army with you. From tomorrow onwards, you will teach me martial arts, okay? Yang Fan stared at his eyes for a long time, and the corner of his mouth slowly revealed a smile. Okay, tomorrow morning, wait for me at the pagoda forest. Ma Chiao winked and smiled. Are you ready to teach me the 18 falls stained clothes? Yang Fan glared at him and said unhappily, when you are 80 years old, I will definitely teach you. Ma Chiao rolled his eyes and said, when I am 80 years old, what's the point? Yang Fan gave a flying kick, and Ma Chiao let out a "ha" and jumped away. Yang Fan laughed and put his hand on the saddle. He jumped up and landed firmly on the back of the horse. In high spirits, he shouted, "Go!" and galloped towards the field. Unexpectedly, the match ended in a draw. For the Jew masters of the imperial army, this competition was not exciting at all. They had always been the strongest team in the Tang dynasty. Their strongest opponents were the Turks and the Tibetans. Within the Tang dynasty, they had always been invincible. As for the motley crew from the White Horse Temple, they did not pay attention at all. Therefore, they were lazy on the field and simply treated this as a friendly competition to deal with their errands. In contrast, the people from the White Horse Temple went all out, especially Chu Kuanga and Yang Fan. Chu Kuanga was the #1 Jew master in the imperial army, and Yang Fan could even control the light wrought tin ball with ease. He was even more skilled at playing polo. When the two of them worked together, it could be said that they were a perfect pair. Coupled with the imperial army's laziness, they actually managed to tie the game. Later, the people from the imperial army found that there were masters among the monks from the White Horse Temple who could compete with them. When they pulled themselves together and wanted to compete with them, the hourglass ran out and the game was over. Xue Huai, who was a super fan and a super bad ball player, could not understand the clues. Seeing that his team, which had been trained for less than half a year, had actually tied with the strongest team in the Tang dynasty, Xue Huai was so happy that he could not close his mouth. Xue Huai could not help but say to Qiu Shinji, "How is it, old Qiu? My team is very good, right?" "Ha ha ha." Qiu Shinji said with a faint smile, "Oh, not bad. It's really not bad to be able to train to this level in such a short period of time. Are you, the chief monk, willing to join the army? If he is willing, I can also find him a position in the army." Qiu Shinji's eyes were very sharp. He could see that Yang Fan was indeed very talented in Jew. It was a waste of talent to keep this kind of talent in the White Horse Temple. If he was brought into the army and trained well, he would definitely become one of the best Jew masters in the imperial army. In a team that was already very strong, if there was a super master, the overall strength of the team would increase unimaginably. Maybe the Tang dynasty could change the embarrassing situation of always being the second best. Xue Huai laughed and said, "What? You even like my 17? You guessed it right. He's one of the few people that I want to ask you to arrange." Speaking of this, Xue Huai scratched his bald head and said, "Damn it, I suddenly feel a little reluctant to part with him." Xue Huai waved his hand and stopped thinking about this problem. He stretched his neck and shouted, "Reception, reception!" The poor reception monk could not receive the pilgrims in the front hall, so he became the abbot's errand boy. As soon as he heard the shout, he hurriedly ran in front of the abbot and said, "Abbot, what are your orders?" Xue Huai said, "Go and quickly prepare some good wine and meat. I am very happy today and want to drink to my heart's content with General Qiu." This White Horse Temple was a peaceful place for Buddhism. Ever since Master Huai became the abbot, he had already broken all the precepts except for sex. The reception monk was already used to this. After hearing Xue Huai's order, he quickly ran out. Xue Huai's abbot's meditation hall was very large. The banquet was held in the meditation room. Qiu Shinji and Xue Huai sat on the meditation bed while the others sat on cattail hassocks. There were 2 rows of tables on the green brick floor. The 10 monks of the White Horse Temple sat on the left side, while the 10 generals of the imperial army sat on the right. Yang Fan was the chief monk of the White Horse Temple. He sat on the chief seat on the left side and was only one step away from Chioshinji. Yang Fan's heart couldn't help but pound. He had to pretend to be calm even though his enemy was right next to him. As soon as the banquet started, Li Dayan and Wei Yong ran to Chu Kuanga's side and respectfully toasted him. Then Li Dayan simply sat next to Chu Kuanga and squeezed in with him. The other generals and officers were very curious about this monk that even General Chiu recognized. After Wei Yong returned to his seat, he told them about Chu Kuanga's background. Among these people, some of the older ones had never seen Chu Kuanga before, but they had heard of his reputation. When they heard that he was the #1 expert in the imperial army, several officers stood up and toasted him. Chu Kuanga didn't dare to be careless and quickly stood up to return the salute. Immediately after, these people toasted Yang Fan. Yang Fan's polo skills were truly superb. Although these officers were proud of their archery skills, they had to admit that Yang Fan's horsemanship wasn't as good as theirs. His ability to seize opportunities was even slightly inferior to theirs. However, as long as his cane touched the polo ball, his ability to use it freely was much better than theirs. Seeing them toasting back and forth, it was quite lively. Chioshinji laughed loudly and said, "Just now, Teacher Xue mentioned to me that after the Upper Yuan Ju competition, Chu Kuanga will be allowed to return to the imperial army. This little brother that you all admire will also return to secular life and join my army. In the future, you will all be fellow brothers. Who knows, you might even become partners in the archery field. Everyone will soon be a family. Why don't you exchange your names and get to know each other?" When the 10 archery masters heard Chioshinji's words, they immediately became lively and raised their cups to announce their names. When Yang Fan heard this, he was really shocked. It turned out that more than half of these 10 people were the children of prominent officials. Chapter 121. Seated at the seat of honor was a young man of 25 or 26. His hair was dark red, his skin fair, his nose sharp, his eyes light blue, and his facial features handsome. It was obvious at a glance that he was a Hu, because he had a different appearance from the other generals. Yang Fan had been paying more attention to him from the very start. During the battle on the battlefield, he had been the bravest of the imperial army. He was happily gnawing on a piece of lamb when he heard Chioshinji say that they would be exchanging names. Wiping his mouth and hands with a towel, he heartily cupped his fists to the monks and loudly said, "Venerable masters, this one is Ashina Huzelyo. There is a Han called Luokadi. Please advise me." Chioshinji stroked his beard and said, "Huzelyo is the great general of the Right Guard and Protector General Mengqi. He is in charge of the 5 tribes of Nushabai. Haha, in terms of official rank, Huzelyo is above this old man. But this time, we're not leading an army in battle, but competing in martial prowess, so there's no need to compare ranks in the army. This old man has the word old, and General Huzelyo has allowed this old man to sit at the seat of honor. Haha." Although Chioshinji spoke very politely, his expression did not show the proper respect. This was because Huzelyo was the current Khagan of the Western Turks. After the schism of the Turks, the Western Turks had gradually declined in power, while the Eastern Turks had risen once more. Under the pressure of the Eastern Turks, the Western Turks had been forced to rely on the Tang dynasty for protection, and the Tang dynasty needed to support the Western Turks in restraining the Eastern Turks, so it had taken him and his tribe in. Huzelyo was relying on the Tang for protection. No matter what official position the Tang dynasty gave him, it was just an empty title. He could only truly command his own people. Although Chioshinji's official rank was slightly lower than his, he was a trusted aide of Empress Wu and the great general of the Golden Guards. His authority was far above Huzelyo's, so he naturally did not need to listen to him. Sitting on the second seat after Hasero was a tall and sturdy man in his 30s. This man had thick eyebrows, a wide mouth, and a squarish face. After Hasero finished speaking, he smiled and cupped his fists. He simply and clearly introduced himself. "I am Xuena, the current commander of the Right Imperial Guard. The third person was short and stocky. His facial features were rather flat, but his eyes were extremely sharp. He also cupped his fists and said, "This one is Li Zhan, currently holding the position of commander of the Northern Gate Guards." The fourth person was tall and sturdy. Even sitting down, he was as majestic as a mountain. His figure was comparable to Chu Kuanga. His nose was high, and his eye sockets were deep. It seemed that he also had some Western regions bloodline. Sure enough, he introduced himself and said, "I am Yi Huli, the current general of the Left Feathered Forest Guard." The fifth person had a clear and fair complexion. He lacked the fierceness of a martial artist and had more of the elegance of a scholar. However, Yang Fan clearly remembered that this person's fighting style was very fierce on the court. It was completely different from his current elegance. He also smiled and cupped his fists at the monks opposite him, saying, "I am Di Guangyuan, the current general of the Fengqin Guards." The sixth person looked to be around the same age as Yang Fan. He was also not yet 20 years old. His facial features were regular, his eyes were clear, and he had a very likable and handsome face. He smiled and cupped his fist, saying, "I am Wang Tongjiao, the current general of the Left Guard Guai." After these six people were Wei Yong, Li Dayan, Lu Yan, and Gao Chu. Among these four, Wei Yong was a captain, Li Dayan was a general, and Lu Yan and Gao Chu had the lowest ranks. From the looks of it, the seats of these people were arranged according to their ranks. Among these four people, Wei Yong and Li Dayan were already familiar with Yang Fan. Lu Yan was a young man of about 26 or 27 years old. His lips were slightly pursed, and his expression was slightly cold. The other captain, Gao Chu, was a few years younger than Lu Yan. He had delicate features and was very handsome. After he introduced himself to the monks opposite him, he winked at Yang Fan and said with a smile, "Others don't know the reputation of the head monk, but I have long heard of the head monk's illustrious name." Yang Fan was surprised, saying, "When did Brother Gao recognize me?" Gao Chu said with a smile, "Today is the first time we have met, but I have long heard of the head monk's name from my younger sister. My younger sister is proud and arrogant, and has never been willing to submit to others. However, she sincerely admires the head monk's cupping technique." Yang Fan hesitated, saying, "May I know who Brother Gao's younger sister is?" Gao Chu said, "My younger sister, Gaoing, is now a female guard in the palace. When the head monk goes to the palace to play cupping, the ball has been broken from under my younger sister's feet more than once. My younger sister was so angry that she kept crying at me when she came back. Why is the head monk pretending not to know her?" Yang Fan cried out involuntarily, "Ah, I remember now. So that young lady is Brother Gao's younger sister. Haha, your younger sister's cupping technique is also quite brilliant. I am very impressed." Lu Yan joked, "Listening to what you said, it is indeed a scene of no discord, no concord. Gao Chu, I remember that your younger sister hasn't been betrothed yet. Look at the head monk's appearance and talent. Do you want to acknowledge him as your younger sister's son-in-law?" Everyone in the hall laughed when they heard this, and they all started to talk at once. Gao Chu was also a forthright person, so he didn't feel offended. He laughed and said, "My younger sister is a military officer in the inner guards. She is more promising than this older brother of mine. If you want to be my younger sister's son-in-law, you should at least be a general." Their banter was originally nothing serious. Although Yang Fan was wearing a kasaya, he had clearly said that after the Lantern Festival, he would renounce asceticism and join the army. However, this was the abbot's meditation hall, and Yang Fan was still a monk wearing a kasaya. Moreover, he was the head monk of the White Horse Temple. Their banter made Taoist Ijua, who was serving wine and meat to the side, unhappy. He stood in the corner, stroked his goatee, shook his head, and sighed. He muttered to himself, "Alas! What a mess, a foul atmosphere." After everyone laughed and chatted for a while, Chioshinji took over the conversation and introduced the people who had given their surnames. Originally, when he heard their self-introductions, all of them were generals in the army. Yang Fan didn't think much of it, but now that he heard their backgrounds, he couldn't help but be moved. Huzelyo was the current Kaghan of Jiujiue. Needless to say, he was the leader of the 5 tribes of New Shibi, a hereditary Turkic noble. The rest of them were all from noble families. Xue Na, the son of the famous general Xue Rengui of the Tang dynasty. Li Zhan, the son of the former prime minister Li Fu. Yi Huli, the son-in-law of the Right Featherwood Guard General Li Duozhua. Di Guangyuan, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Works, and the son of the Jiangnan Inspector Di Renj. Wang Tongjiao, a direct descendant of the Wang clan of Taiyuan. Only the remaining 4 people, Wei Yong, Li Dayin, Lu Yan, and Gao Chu, didn't seem to have any illustrious family background, so Chioshinji didn't deliberately introduce them. After listening to Chioshinji introduce the family background of these people, Chu Tinga couldn't help but lean closer to Yang Fan. He said in a low voice, "These people all have huge families behind them. I can see that they really admire your skills. You might as well make friends with them. This will be very beneficial to your future." Yang Fan smiled and didn't say anything. He just quickly glanced at Chioshinji, who was sitting cross-legged on the Luohan bed. He thought to himself, "I still don't know how long I will stay in the officialdom." Chioshinji didn't notice Yang Fan's meaningful glance. He put his hands on his knees and said to the imperial guards, "Just now, I have discussed with Master Xue. You will all stay in the White Horse Temple for the next few days and focus on practicing bow hitting. Occasionally, you will exchange pointers with the people of the White Horse Temple. When the bow hitting competition is over, you will all return to the headquarters." As for General Huzelyo, Chioshinji looked inquiringly at Luo Kadi. Luo Kadi bowed and said with a smile, "Kadi is only a bow-hitting player selected by the Imperial Guards. Everything will follow General Chio's arrangements." Chioshinji laughed and said, "That's good. If General has nothing important to do, you can also stay here. After I leave, General Huzelyo will be in charge of everything here. After a while, you can go back and see if there is anything that has not been explained clearly or if there is anything that needs to be taken. From tomorrow onwards, you will stay in the White Horse Temple until the Lantern Festival." Early in the morning, the trees, grass, and stone towers in the forest were all covered with a layer of pale autumn frost. The morning mist lingered in the forest, and the sky was gray. The morning stars had already disappeared, and the sun had not yet risen. Ma Chiao held a Buddhist commandment blade in his hand. He faced the air in front of him and very seriously slashed with it. Today, he woke up early in the morning. He was full of joy, thinking that Yang Fan was going to teach him some profound martial arts. He was also very worried that he would not be able to comprehend it with his aptitude. He did not expect that what Yang Fan taught him was actually so simple. Yang Fan took a Buddhist commandment blade, stood still and slashed with it. He then threw the blade to him and told him to practice slashing. This morning, he did not do anything else. He only swung the blade, slashed, sheathed the blade, and swung it again after he had slashed dozens of times. Yang Fan, who was watching from the side with his arms crossed, walked over. He told him the posture of holding the blade, the angle of the slash, the strength of the blade, and the secrets of breathing when performing this series of actions. After he had memorized it, he still wanted him to continue slashing, and then he went into the forest to practice martial arts. So simple? This is martial arts? With his back bare, he chopped mechanically and impatiently. Ma Chiao gradually became confused. He did not know when, but Yang Fan came back from the morning mist and stood quietly to watch him practice. When Ma Chiao's energy was no longer focused and the slash in his hand became a little sluggish, he suddenly said, "In fact, there is nothing magical about martial arts. Practicing martial arts is also not a very interesting thing. In the final analysis, there are only two things to practice martial arts. One is the body and the other is the skills. The body needed to train one's strength, making one's strength far surpassing that of an ordinary person. The body needed to train one's reaction speed, making one's six senses far sharper than that of an ordinary person. As for techniques, they needed to be refined and refined by generations of predecessors. What I want you to practice now is the strength of your arms, waist, and legs, as well as the cooperation and tacit understanding between them. You must practice each slash according to the method I teach you. That is not only for the body, but also for the skills of wielding the blade and breathing. In the past, I stood on a stake in the middle of a huge wave for 3 years. If you want to stand out, then continue to practice. The more you suffer now, the more blessings you will enjoy in the future. If you can't persevere, then forget it. Ma Chiao took a deep breath, spread his legs, and plunged his feet again. His slash was slower than before, but each slash was very serious. He completely followed Yang Fan's instructions. Whether it was the posture of holding the blade or the movement of drawing the blade, he used all his strength in each slash. 1 slash, 1 slash, 100 slashes, 100 slashes. His arm was already swollen, and his ligaments seemed to be pulled. If it were not for the pain from his shoulder and arm that stimulated him, he would almost think that the arm that held the blade no longer belonged to him. But he still gritted his teeth and endured. His movements became slower and slower. Sometimes after drawing the blade, he needed to take a few breaths to adjust his whole body strength and strive to make a slash that satisfied him. The sun came out, shining on his body that was covered in sweat. The sunlight reflected off his sweat, making it sparkle. He still gritted his teeth and persevered, seriously slashing out with each slash. The bell rang, the sound of the morning bell echoing throughout Luoyang City. This morning, perhaps in a certain workshop, there was a certain shopkeeper with eye ulcers, yawning like a hippopotamus, trembling as he went to open the door. But that person would definitely not be called Ma Chiao. Chapter 122. Every morning, the monks of White Horse Temple and the Imperial Army would hold a match against each other. In the afternoon, they would train separately. For the monks of the White Horse Temple, competing against such a strong team was definitely a process of rapid improvement. Almost every time a match ended, they could learn something or comprehend something from it. These experiences might not be immediately transformed into substantial improvement, but they would be remembered in your mind and be digested and absorbed. At that time, your strength would be greatly improved. For the Imperial Army experts such as Xuan Na and Di Guangyuan, the matches against the monks of White Horse Temple were not completely useless. They were carefully selected from the experts of the Imperial Army. In the usual internal confrontations, they were clear about the level of other people. However, they were not familiar with Yang Fan and Chu Kuanga. These two people, one had a rough fighting style, while the other had exquisite techniques. They were the type of people that they were unfamiliar with in the past, so every time they fought, in order to strengthen the confrontation, they would withdraw half of their team members and only send out 5 people. With 5 people against 10, they would fight with all their strength. This way, the strength of both sides could more or less be balanced. These days, Ma Chiao was almost completely ignored. No one noticed where he was. He had never been the focus of other people's attention. Every day, Ma Chiao would practice martial arts in the silent pagoda forest. When Yang Fan and the others came down from the court, they would be covered in dirt and sweat. At this time, Ma Chiao would also come out of the pagoda forest. He was also wet as if he had just been fished out of the water. There was a mountain spring behind the White Horse Temple. Even though it was a bit cold in autumn, it was still a bit warm at noon. In addition, their bodies were strong, so they didn't feel cold while bathing naked at the edge of the spring. After a morning of matches, Yang Fan and the others came to the spring in 2s and 3s to bathe. At this time, Ma Chiao also came out of the pagoda forest with tired steps. Yang Fan and Ma Chiao stood in a water hole to bathe. Yang Fan scooped up half a bucket of water and poured it on his head. Then he picked up a loofah and rubbed his chest. He said to Ma Chiao, "I am relieved that you are so hard-working. However, going too far is just as bad as not going far enough. It's enough to practice in the morning. Don't practice in the afternoon and evening. Later, I'll teach you how to train your waist and legs. Come, help me rub my back." Ma Chiao took the melon pulp. Yang Fan leaned against a rock. Ma Chiao rubbed his back vigorously and said, "Good. After practicing for a few days, I feel that there is indeed something different when I use my saber. I can't explain it clearly. It's not that I've suddenly become much stronger, it's just that I feel. Yeah. In the past, I could only use the strength of my arm when I swung my saber. Now, it seemed as though all the strength of my body could be concentrated in my hand. Not only is his attack powerful, but his speed is also extremely fast. The method you taught is indeed brilliant. I think I'll just concentrate on practicing martial arts. After all, the army is a place where ability is the most important. Even Xue Na, Di Guangyuan, and the others, although they have an amazing father, they also have real ability. Only by training a body full of real ability can they have the opportunity to stand out." Yang Fan smiled and said, "That's right. Later, I'll accompany you back to Xiaowen workshop and tell Ani about your plan. Auntie will definitely be very happy when she finds out. It will also save her the trouble of always playing with those little things. Auntie is old and her eyesight isn't good. If you want to marry a wife, it's better to rely on your own ability." After Ma Chiao finished rubbing Yang Fan's back, it was Yang Fan's turn to rub his back. Ma Chiao leaned against the rock and half bent his body as he said, "Yeah, I'll listen to you. You have a body full of good ability. It seems that Great General Chiao also appreciates you. In the future, you will definitely have a bright future. Us brothers will join the army together. One day, we will all become great generals, bringing honor to our ancestors and blessing our descendants." Haha, you're right to think that way. Brother Chiao, this is an important opportunity in your life. You must grasp it. What are you talking about? You're laughing so happily. Chu Kuanga walked over the stream and asked with a smile. Without waiting for them to answer, he said, "Li Da and Wei Sen have not seen me for many years. They want to invite me out for a drink. Lu Yan and Gao Chu also want to come along. How about it? Do you and Brother Chiao want to come along?" Yang Fan asked, "Have you decided on a place to go?" Chu Kuanga said, "The two of them grew up in the army and are not familiar with the restaurants in Luoyang. The places I usually go to are small restaurants. Once we leave the White Horse Temple, we can just look for one." Yang Fan said with a smile, "I know a place. The environment is quiet and the food is good." Chu Kuanga smiled and said, "Okay, then I'll trouble you to lead the way." Yang Fan patted Ma Chao's buttocks and said with a smile, "Don't pout. If you keep rubbing it, the skin will fall off. Quickly put on your clothes and let's go eat." Yang Fan washed up and put on his clothes. He carried the wooden bucket and washing utensils back to the White Horse Temple. Before he entered the meditation room, Wang Tongjiao rode a white horse and greeted him with a smile. "Xiao Fan, General Luo, Brother Xue, we're going to the Golden Hairpin Drunk to eat. Do you want to go together?" Yang Fan had been in contact with them for a few days. He had already discovered that the 10 Imperial Army archery masters were basically divided into two groups. Luo Kadi, Xue Na, Di Guangyuan, and the other children of the officials were one group. Li Deyin, Wei Yong, Gao Chu, and Lu Yen were the other group. This group did not mean that the two sides were opposed to each other, but that they would naturally gather together. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. Different origins, family backgrounds, and statuses naturally formed a gap between them. Therefore, they formed different social circles. Yang Fan was startled and replied, "Unfortunately, I've already made an appointment with Brother Kuanga and the others to go out for a drink. If there's a chance, I'll drink with Brother Xue and Brother Wang again. Wang Tongjiao was slightly surprised. She laughed and said, "All right, then let's meet up another day. We'll be leaving first." At the temple gate, Luo Kadi Xuana and the others were already on their horses. It seemed like they were waiting for him. Wang Tongjiao whipped her horse and left. Ma Qiao anxiously said, "You idiot, they invited you with good intentions. Why did you refuse? These people are either the sons of nobles or the disciples of generals and ministers. If you can make friends with them, it will be very beneficial to your future. Why did you?" Yang Fan lightly said, "Since I've already promised to go out with Brother Chu, how can I break the promise? Let's go and get ready. It's time to go out." At this time, Chu Kuanga had already walked out of his residence. He saw the scene of Wang Tongjiao and Yang Fan talking from afar. Immediately after, they spurred their horses and left the White Horse Temple. Chu Kuanga walked over and asked, "What happened to Commandant Wang?" Ma Qiao blurted out, "They invited Xiao Fan to go out for a drink, but that idiot refused." Chu Kuanga was greatly surprised. He looked deeply at Yang Fan and said, "These people are either rich or noble. You really shouldn't have refused. If you could become brothers with them, it would be of great help to your career. We brothers don't need to be outsiders. If you want a drink, won't there be plenty of opportunities?" Yang Fan smiled and said, "Big Brother Chu, are you trying to talk like that? Don't say any more. Look, Brother Li and Brother Wei are already ready. Let's go." In a quiet forest on Guide Lane in the south of Luoyang, the small two-story red building still stood there. The trees in the forest rustled, and the evergreen trees were also dyed with the color of late autumn. The colors darkened, and as a result, the small red building lost some of its beauty, revealing a bit of desolation. Usually, this restaurant had very few customers. Only a few frustrated scholars and low-ranking officials with rough official careers would come here to grieve over the hardships of life, recite poems, and compose prose to vent their bitter feelings. At this time, the number of customers was even fewer. When Yang Fan, Chu Tinga, Wei Yong, Li Dayin, Ma Qiao, and the others rushed over, the small building was empty. There was not a single customer. The old shopkeeper didn't show any surprise at the sudden arrival of 7 guests. It was probably because living in this forest for a long time had made him open-minded and unworldly. He seemed to be indifferent to favors or disgraces. This was exactly what Yang Fan and the others wanted. Because there had always been very few customers, the tavern did not have enough ingredients and did not have any rich dishes. However, the wine here was still quite good. With a few plates and 2 jars of wine, the 7 of them dominated the 2-story building. They drank and talked loudly, very relaxed and happy. "Big brother, this first cup of wine, this little brother will first toast you. This little brother has not touched wine for many years. But today this little brother must break the rule and drink to my heart's content. This little brother." At this point, Li Dayin's voice suddenly choked up. 2 lines of tears flowed down his hairy face. Chu Kuanga frowned and said unhappily, "Dayin, what are you doing? Don't mention that matter in the future. It is a good thing that we brothers have reunited. If you always talk about this matter, I will feel very uncomfortable." Wei Yong hurriedly raised his cup and said, "Dayin, Big Brother Chu is about to return to the Imperial Army. We brothers are going to be together again. This is a happy occasion. Today, let's congratulate Big Brother and treat it as an early welcome. Don't cry about such a happy occasion. It's so unlucky." Good, good, good. Today is Big Brother's happy day. Brother won't say anything else. Let's toast Big Brother." Li Dayin raised his cup with tears in his smile and drank it in one gulp with trembling lips. Chu Kuanga patted him on the shoulder and also raised his cup to drink. The other 3 each drank a cup. Wei Yong raised his cup and proposed, "This second cup of wine is for Brother Yang. Brother, after a year we will be fellow brothers. Master Xue and Commander Chiu think so highly of you. Once you enter the army, your future will be limitless and enviable. You must drink this cup of wine." Yang Fan raised his cup with a smile and said, "Third brother Wei, among us brothers, I am the youngest and the most inexperienced. How can I deserve a toast from you guys? I should be the one toasting you guys. Speaking of Master Shui and Commander Chio's high regard, the martial arts in the arena is just a small way to entertain people and is not worth mentioning. But it can't compare to the contributions that you all have made on the battlefield. My brothers are all commoner clans, but to have such a status today, it is all because of your military exploits. This little brother admires you from the bottom of his heart." Chapter 123. Chu Kuanga laughed and said, "How can you not deserve this toast from us? Not to mention anything else. Just the fact that you can refuse General Shui's invitation and accompany us here to drink wine. This kind of behavior is something that not many people can do. Frankly speaking, if the person they invited was me, I can't guarantee that I wouldn't refuse the banquet here and go to their appointment." Li Dayan said curiously, "What are you talking about, big brother?" Chu Kuanga told him about Yang Fan's refusal to meet with Shui Na and the others. Li Dayan was surprised and said, "How many people have tried their best to get the approval of this group of people and become one of them? Such a rare opportunity. You actually refused?" Wei Yong also showed a slightly surprised and admiring expression and said, "Shui Na is the son of our Tang dynasty's famous General Shui Ringoe. Do you know how many generals in our Tang dynasty army came from General Shui? Li Zhan is the son of the former Prime Minister, Li Yifu. Although Li Yifu has passed away, he was the Minister of Personnel for many years. Who knows how many officials were promoted by him, and he is also a big tree with deep roots in the court. Yi Huli is the son-in-law of the Feather Wood Guard General Li Duozhua. Di Guangyuan is the son of Di Renjie. Wang Tongjiao is the direct descendant of the Wang family of Taiyuan. Brother Yang, do you know that if you can be recognized and accepted by them, your future will be limitless?" Yang Fan said helplessly, "We are drinking happily. Why are we talking about this again? Brothers don't have a noble family to rely on, but aren't they still outstanding?" Lu Yen put down her wine cup and sighed. "Brother Yang, you are too naive. Yes, we do have some official positions in the army, but do you know how much more effort we have to put in than others? With the same military achievements, if we had their background, how could we only be a brigade commander now?" These words hit the hearts of these people, and they couldn't help but nod and sigh. Li Dayan said, "Yes, they have a good father, so it is easier for them to get promoted than us. We are all ordinary people. It is not easy to get ahead. If I, Li Dayan, had such a background, I wouldn't have been bullied by my superiors, and I wouldn't have implicated Brother Chu." He paused for a moment and glanced at Wei Yong. Pointing at him, he said with a smile, "However, if you want to talk about their backgrounds, you can't generalize them. We are commoners, but Wei San is not. Wei San is also from a wealthy family, and his family background is not lower than those people. Unfortunately, his family background has become his burden. Otherwise, based on his military service in quelling Ji Rin by Tiyu's rebellion, and his great merit in following General Cheng Wading in counterattacking the Turks, where he led 500 soldiers against 3,000 elite cavalry, he would at least have been promoted to Langjiang." Yang Fan was surprised and asked, "Oh, may I know third brother Wei's background?" Wei Yong couldn't stop him in time, and Li Dayan's big mouth had already spoken. Now that he heard Yang Fan's question, he hesitated for a moment, then laughed and said, "I am from Julu. My ancestor is the Duke of Wei. My name is Zheng." Yang Fan was taken aback and said respectfully, "So, third brother Wei is the descendant of the Duke of Zheng? My apologies, my apologies. The Duke of Zheng was Wei Zheng. So why was Wei Yong's descendant an obstacle to his promotion? This was due to the outstanding example of a monarch and minister, Li Shimin and Wei Zheng. Li Shimin and Wei Zheng were the model of a monarch and minister in the history books. But was their relationship as pure as the history books made it out to be? In fact, it was not. Wei Zhang was talented, but Li Shimin had many talented subordinates under him. At the very least, Wei Zhang could not be compared to Fang Xianling and Du Ruhui. After Li Shimin started the coup of Xuanwu Gate, killed his brothers, and seized the throne, why did he try so hard to recruit him? The main reason was political necessity. At that time, the Tang dynasty was not stable both inside and outside the country. Liang Shidu and other separatist forces had not been completely eradicated, and the remnants of Li Jianqing and Li Yuanji's faction were scattered everywhere. The old Sui officials who had pledged allegiance to the Tang dynasty and various rebel forces were still unsettled, and the Turkic army was eyeing them covetously. At that time, the Tang dynasty could not fall into chaos. He had to win over the support of all forces. What was the biggest force in the Tang dynasty at that time? The aristocrats of Shandong, aristocratic families east of Mount Taihang. The aristocrats of Shandong were too powerful. Li Shimin had to use them and guard against them at the same time. Who could keep them in check? The heroes of Shandong, of course. The heroes of Shandong were the leaders of the rebel army in Shandong during the chaos at the end of the Sui dynasty. After they surrendered to the Tang dynasty, they became the new landlords of Shandong. Wei Zhang was the leader of the rebel army who participated in the Wagong village uprising and was one of the heroes of Shandong. He was the key figure in Li Shimin's subjugation of the heroes of Shandong. Now that he was the head of Li Jianqing's Eastern Palace's strategist, he was the best candidate to contact the various forces. Li Shimin would never kill such a person. However, although Li Shimin had achieved his goal of appeasing the aristocrats of Shandong, winning over the heroes of Shandong, and taking over Li Jianqing's Eastern Palace, he had also caused some obstacles in other aspects. For example, when Li Shimin wanted to take back the 4 commanderies of Liaodong and Han that had been occupied by Goguryeo during the civil strife in the Central Plains, he was vehemently opposed by Wei Zhang. Once a war broke out, Shandong would be the first to bear the brunt of it. The corvée and taxes there would inevitably be increased, affecting the interests of the entire Shandong region. The common people of Shandong hoped that the world would have less corvée and less corvée, because the fall of the Sui dynasty was closely related to the heavy corvée in Shandong. The Shandong group had suffered greatly and was naturally sensitive to such matters. Li Shimin gave up on attacking Goguryeo. Rather than saying that he had been persuaded by Wei Zhang, it was more because he had seen the strong opposition of the entire Shandong group. Later, when Li Shimin was preparing to ascend Mount Tai to perform the ceremony, Wei Zhang was adamantly against it, saying that it was a waste of manpower and money. Although it was a waste of manpower and money, Wei Zhang's opposition had a deeper political reason. The Shandong group did not want the Guanlong group, represented by the emperor, to take advantage of the ceremony to infiltrate and encroach on Shandong. Li Shimin was well aware of the power behind Wei Zhang. He had just ascended the throne and the country was not yet at peace, so he could not confront this powerful force head-on. Therefore, he had no choice but to go against his will and accept Wei Zhang's direct remonstrations. But while Li Shimin was enduring to achieve enlightenment, the anger in his heart continued to accumulate. On the surface, the two of them continued to put on a political show of a wise ruler and a virtuous minister in front of the world. 10 years after Li Shimin became the emperor, the world gradually stabilized, and his power grew stronger. Wei Zhang was no longer of much use to him, so he was chased away by Li Shimin to revise the history books. At the same time, he began to weaken the Shandong group. After Wei Zhang's death, Li Shimin became in-laws with Li Shimin. This political show, which benefited both Li Shimin and Wei Zhang, could have come to a perfect end. Unexpectedly, 2 incidents happened one after another, both of which were related to Wei Zhang. Li Shimin's suppressed anger finally exploded. First, Du Jingluan and Hou Junji, who were highly recommended by Wei Zhang, met with misfortune one after another. One was demoted and the other was killed for treason. Li Shimin began to suspect whether Wei Zheng's recommendation of these two people was out of the public interest. Then, to his surprise, he heard another incident that drove him to the limits of his tolerance. It turned out that every time Wei Zheng admonished the emperor, he would make a copy of his memorial and send it to Chu Suiliang, who was personally recommended by him. Li Shimin had killed his brothers and forced his father to abdicate the throne. This had always been a sore point for him. He interfered with the revision of the history books, tampered with the history books, and repeatedly asked the historian what was written in the daily notes. He even demanded to see the daily notes for himself before he could be at ease. This was all because of his sense of moral crisis. Now he heard that Wei Zheng was doing such a thing. What was Wei Zheng trying to do? Did he want to leave a good name in the annals of history and leave it to me? Ma Zhou was also famous for his straightforward admonitions. Before his death, he ordered his family to destroy all the manuscripts that advised Li Shimin to hide the wrongs of the emperor. This was the complete opposite of Wei Zheng's approach. It was obvious which of the two liked to put on a show. The suppressed anger in Li Shimin's heart finally erupted like a volcano. The furious Li Shimin lifted his hammer and smashed Wei Zheng's tombstone with his own hands. Naturally, the marriage between Wei Zheng and Wei Zhang was ruined. In the 18th year of Jingguan, Li Shimin's first expedition to Gaoli failed. Hence, he rebuilt Wei Zheng's tombstone and consoled Wei Zheng's family. However, it was just another political show to repair his reputation and rebuild his image as a courtier. In the end, the marriage with the Wei family was never mentioned again. In fact, the descendants of the Wei family were still neglected. For thousands of years, the story of Li Shimin and Wei Zheng, a wise ruler and a frank minister, had been widely spread. No one knew that there was also a struggle for fame and fortune behind it. It was a legend of a wise ruler and a good minister. It was a model example of a pair of politicians using each other. There was a type of history called a fairy tale. Unfortunately, the history that we know is often a fairy tale or a myth. Just like Yao Xuanyu's abdication of the throne, under the warm and affectionate atmosphere was a bloody attempt to force the emperor to abdicate, use of military force and seize power. In the fairy tale, the prince and princess always lived a simple and happy life. Wei Yong sighed as he recounted the joys and sorrows of the past few years. The others listened with sorrow and sorrow. Only Yang Fan raised his cup and said with a smile, "This little brother rejected Commandant Wang's invitation." My brothers felt sorry for this little brother. But after hearing third brother Wei's words, this little brother feels that he did not do anything wrong. He swept his gaze across the crowd and said, "Even the story of a ruler and minister for thousands of years is not so simple, let alone you and me. If we did not have the same ambition or the same path, and only because of my outstanding Bao technique, I was favored by Generals Xue and Di. Even if I pandered to them in every possible way, could I really gain their respect? The noble families also started out ordinary. Thousands of years ago, weren't they also commoner families? I advise you not to belittle yourselves. As long as we are willing to work hard, there may be a chance that we will meet again in the future." Chu Kuanga listened with lofty sentiments. He raised his cup and said, "Xiao Fan's words are reasonable. Let's drink to the future, to our world. Cheers! Cheers! Cheers!" On this autumn, in the forest of Guide Lane, above a small building, 7 people and 7 cups of wine clinked together. Chapter 124. Day after day, Yang Fan and Ma Chiao practiced martial arts in the White Horse Temple. The autumn wind blew, and the fallen leaves gradually turned into white snow. On New Year's Day, the Imperial Guards went home to celebrate the new year with their families. Yang Fan and Ma Chiao also asked Xue Huai for leave and rushed back to the Xiuwen workshop to celebrate the new year with Ma Chiao's family. They stayed up on New Year's Eve, ate New Year's Eve dinner, drank pepper wine, ate 5 spicy plates, hung peach talismans, watched the exorcism dance, went to the Pass on the Seat. On the first day of the new year, visited relatives, friends, and neighbors. After 3 lively days, they returned to the White Horse Temple and continued their intense training. After New Year's Eve was the Lantern Festival. In the Tang Dynasty, the Lantern Festival seemed to be more grand than the Spring Festival. This time, even Xue Huai was busy. The Lantern Festival was a grand festival in Luoyang. On that day, there would be a lantern show. Not only would the rich people make colorful lanterns, but even the government would make colorful lanterns to celebrate with the people. How could Xue Huai be willing to fall behind in this kind of limelight? He had already spent a lot of money to hire many skilled craftsmen. Once the Spring Festival was over, these people were immediately invited to the White Horse Temple to use the empty space in the backyard to make a large lantern tree. Xue Huai only had one requirement for the lantern tree. It must be the biggest, brightest, and cover all the colorful lanterns in the entire Luoyang. Most of these skilled craftsmen were the skilled craftsmen that Xue Huai had used to build Bright Hall and Heaven. It wasn't difficult for them to create the largest and most beautiful lamp tree in Luoyang. They quickly came up with a plan and began making it. Because the place where they made the lantern was in the backyard of the White Horse Temple, Yang Fan and the others would watch curiously when they had free time. According to the craftsmen, the lantern tree was 10 hugs thick and 100 feet tall. After it was finished, it could light up 9,999 lanterns at the same time. Just the lamp oil to burn for one night would cost a lot. Only a rich monk like Xue Huai could make such a huge lantern tree. However, if such a huge lamp tree were to be produced directly, no one would be able to move it from the White Horse Temple to Ding Ding Street for display. Therefore, when it was produced in the temple, it was divided into 6 feet per layer. Therefore, Yang Fan and the others were unable to see the spectacular sight of it. Time flew by. The White Horse Temple's disciples were training hard and looking forward to the Shangyuan Festival, and the Shangyuan Festival was approaching day by day. Finally, the Lantern Festival arrived. This was a grand festival for all the people of the Tang Dynasty. During the Spring Lantern Festival, the imperial court gave special permission to lift the curfew, which was called the night release. For these 3 days, the streets and alleys, the tea houses and wine shops were all lit up, the gongs and drums sounded, and firecrackers were set off. The lights were lit for hundreds of miles, and everywhere was festive. During the Lantern Festival, there would be many celebrations in the palace. Therefore, there would be no bow-striking competition or other entertainment activities on the first day. With the competition around the corner, everyone needed to relax and reunite with their friends and family. Therefore, the members of the bow-striking team of the Imperial Army had already left to return to their respective homes and reunite with their families. The White Horse Temple was especially prosperous at this time. The problem was that the abbot and the chief monk were fake monks who didn't even know how to read scriptures. They had no interest in these things. Fortunately, they didn't care about these things at all. If those benefactors met Xue Huai and Yang Fan, these 2 monks who didn't even know how to read scriptures, it would be hard to say if they would still be willing to fork out money for the incense. There were all kinds of banquets held in the palace, and Xue Huai also had to enter the palace to celebrate. He originally didn't have the awareness of being a monk, and he also didn't treat Yang Fan as a real monk. Before entering the palace to attend the banquet, he specifically told them to go back and reunite with their families, as long as they didn't forget about tomorrow's competition. Chu Kuanga was forcefully dragged by the great hermit Li to celebrate the Lantern Festival with his group of ruffian brothers. Yang Fan and Ma Chiao took off their monk robes and changed into ordinary clothes before returning to the Xiuwen workshop. It would be indecent for them to be bald, but this was easy to deal with. They just needed to wear a woolen felt hat. In the evening, before the sky was completely dark, many places had already lit up their lanterns. Every workshop's doors were wide open, allowing people to enter and exit freely. Ma Chao and Yang Fan were burning with impatience. They casually ate some face silkworms and then invited Jiang Sining to go to the streets to watch the lanterns together. Auntie Ma and a group of old sisters naturally wanted to watch the lanterns as well. However, They were already old, so they only walked around the workshop and chatted with their old neighbors. They didn't stray too far away, so Ma Chiao could go play on the streets without worry. When the two of them arrived at Jiang Sining's house, Jiang Sining had already dressed up. She wore a new set of clothes. Her hair was tied up delicately, and her eyebrows were trimmed very fine. Although she didn't put on any makeup, it was clear that her facial features had been carefully made up. At the very least, her bright red lips were definitely smeared with lipstick, and they were pink and cute. As soon as he saw them arrive, he went out into the street with them, beaming with joy. On the main street, there was an endless number of lantern houses and lanterns. Lantern houses, lantern corridors, and lantern sheds were connected for several miles. Regardless of whether it was the common people, the various shops, or the homes of high officials and nobles, they were all decorated with lanterns and colored banners. Even the various ministries and departments had set up tents and lantern houses. On the streets, there was an endless stream of people playing tricks and selling snacks. During the Shangyuan festival, there wasn't a single scholar or woman who didn't go out at night. For these 3 days, they could all put down their statuses. Usually, it was rare to see the daughters of rich and powerful families were also accompanied by their maids and servants to the streets to watch the lanterns. As a result, the entire Luoyang city was filled with carriages and horses, and the crowds were surging. If it was usually this crowded, it was inevitable that some impatient people wouldn't be able to help but curse. However, today was a festival, and this kind of liveliness was needed, so no one felt impatient. Everyone was walking with their feet splayed out, looking around, pointing and chatting. If there was a family's lantern wheel, lantern tree, or lantern house in front of their door, they would all have new and exquisite designs, attracting many people to stop and look. There were some firecracker peddlers who used donkeys to pull towering bamboo poles along the street to sell their goods. Some families would bring out a brazier and place it in front of their door. They would spend money to buy firecrackers and pile them on top of the brazier and immediately light them up. For a moment, the sound of pai pai pa 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 could be heard without end. On the spacious main street, there were also some workshops that organized young and strong people to play a lead hook game. The so-called lead hook was a tug-of-war. In the middle, there was a large flag as the boundary. 2 workshops each sent out dozens of strong young men to tug-of-war with ropes. On the side, countless young women waved their handkerchiefs and shouted to cheer. The most lively place was, of course, Ding Ding Street. In the middle of the street, a huge lantern tree stood there, illuminating the street as if it was daytime. The 3 big characters, White Horse Temple, impressively appeared on the lampstand. Under the lantern, there were many people clapping and singing. There were men and women, old and young. Hundreds of men and women held hands and sang and danced around the lantern tree. The tune they sang was very simple. From beginning to end, there were only 2 parts of the song. However, as the saying goes, step tune is boundless. The tune is the same, but the words are different. This was originally a relatively casual celebration game. If you didn't know how to dance, it didn't matter. Just holding hands with others and jumping and moving around the lantern tree rhythmically was enough to match the beat of the piccolo and chong drum. Of course, there were also some young women who danced very well. Following the soul-stirring beat of the chong drum, they drew their shoulders, lowered their chins, covered their arms, swung their backs, loosened their knees, twisted their waists, and bent their hips, forming a 3 bends in chanting posture. Then a kind of graceful charm was presented, just right. It made people intoxicated and their spirits gallop. With a sweet smile, I strive to be gentle and graceful. The indescribable taste of women could be seen clearly in this dance and dance. I'm also going to dance. Ma Chiao watched excitedly. He couldn't help but say something to Yang Fan and Pasta, and then excitedly squeezed into the crowd. The people who were dancing happily accepted him. They loosened their tightly held hands and took the opportunity to grab Ma Chiao's hand and let him join in. Oh, A small hand on the left, a small hand on the right, warm and soft, smooth and greasy. They were all the hands of young girls. Ma Chiao really knew how to pick. There were men and women, old and young, dancing and dancing. He just happened to find the right time and chose two cute and pretty girls who just happened to jump in front of him. Yang Fan shook his head and said with a smile, "Chiao Ge really knows how to pick." Jiang Sining raised her little nose in disdain and snorted coldly. "I think a dog can't stop eating **T. I'm going to buy a few oil hammers. Do you want to eat some?" Yang Fan clapped his hands to the beat of the Chang drum and swayed his body left and right along with the people who were dancing and singing. He replied with a smile, "Okay." Jiang Sining took out a handkerchief from his pocket and opened it. There were a dozen or so copper coins inside. Jiang Sining took out a few copper coins and put the handkerchief in his pocket and squeezed his way to a small stall selling oil hammers. At that time, there was no yuanxiao yet. However, this snack, oil hammers, was already similar to fried yuanxiao. It was also a kind of sweet food made from glutinous rice. Jiang Sining was a girl, so naturally she liked to eat it. Jiang Sining bought 7 or 8 oil hammers and carried them in an oiled paper bag before rushing back. The oil hammers had just been fried and were still hot. The two of them ate the oil hammers while watching the dance. At this time, a few handsome young masters were slowly walking along the main street of Dingding. They looked around along the way and smiled like flowers. These young masters were all wearing plain, colored robes. Some had round collars, some had cross collars, and some wore soft leggings on their heads. There were also some who were young master headscarves. All of them were handsome and looked as if they were made of jade. At first glance, these few young masters were quite stunning to the girls. However, after a closer look, they could recognize that they were a group of females disguised with hairpins. This was because they did not deliberately conceal the makeup on their facial features. Their lips were painted red, and their facial features were a little too exquisite. Even though these girls were wearing men's clothing, they were still a group of girls. Girls loved to look beautiful, so they did not wear too much under their robes to prevent their bodies from becoming bloated. As a result, their faces were slightly red from the cold. However, they were clearly in high spirits. "Wow, look at that lamp tree. It's too spectacular. I wonder which Yamen made this. This is the first time I've seen such a huge lamp tree. Let's go and take a look." The one who spoke was a little beauty with a baby face. Her face was red from the cold, like a cute red apple. She was the female attendant of the First Lady, Lan Yiqing. The few young masters beside her were naturally Xiamuin, Gao Ying, and the others.